Chapter 7:12. It's them. Killing a magic light level void beast in one blow. Such destructive power was extremely rare among the younger generation. Many people looked at Gray and the other three in surprise. Most of them were disciples of the Chaos Temple. As disciples of the Chaos Temple, they had a natural sense of superiority. Even the three strongest families were powerless in front of the Chaos Temple. They were proud of being disciples of the Chaos Temple and had always looked down on the disciples of the top families. Now that they saw Gray and the other three displaying strength that was rarely seen among the younger generation, they finally stopped looking down on them and began to take them seriously. The red-haired Julio recognized the four at a glance. After all, it had only been 2 or 3 months since the Trial Tower trial. As someone who had also participated in that trial, he naturally had an impression of them. He has this kind of strength as well? His gaze swept across the four and finally landed on Gray. His gaze was slightly surprised. Although he was surprised that Blanca Mandy, Landrin Gomo, and George Lopez had displayed such strength, he could still understand. After all, the three of them were the most outstanding disciples of this generation of the three strongest families. In terms of talent, they were only slightly inferior to him. The only thing that surprised him was that Gray had this kind of strength as well. The Leopold clan was only at the bottom of the top clans. They couldn't be compared to the three strongest clans at all. There was a difference of several levels between them. However, a disciple of such a clan was actually comparable to the most outstanding disciple of this generation of the three strongest clans. This really surprised him. I've underestimated him. I wonder how many floors he reached in the last trial tower. I think it should be 20 floors? Although he was surprised, he did not think that the other party could compare or even surpass him. He looked down and remembered the other party in his mind. With the other party's strength and potential, the other party was qualified to deal with him. If there was a chance after this, he would try to get in touch with the other party. As a disciple of the Chaos Temple, which was one of the top forces, he needed his own personal network just like Blanca Mandy and the others. He's not inferior to us? It wasn't just Julio. Even Branca Mandy and the others, who had teamed up with Gray, couldn't help but reveal looks of surprise in their eyes. To think that Gray actually possessed combat power comparable to the three of them. Although he had already thought highly of the other party, or else he would not have invited the other party to join his group, it would appear that he had still somewhat underestimated the other party. Just like the Leopold family, the other party could not be underestimated. A month ago, no one would have thought that the Leopold clan, which was at the bottom of the top clans, would be able to defeat the Wejia clan. However, the Leopold clan did it and even made the Wejia clan suffer a huge loss and have to compensate. As for the other party, they were just like the Leopold family. They usually kept a low profile, but at crucial moments, they would also display unexpected strength. Seeing the performance of Gray's group of four, the Chaos Temple's disciples were naturally unwilling to be outdone. Poof! A tall and skinny youth from the Chaos Temple wielded a spear that was enveloped in a greenish-black glow. With a stab of the spear, a magic light void beast was pierced through, creating a huge hole in its front and back. The void beast then fell to the ground with a loud bang. Poof! A brown-haired youth from the Chaos Temple stood still. In front of him, dozens of silver metal blades were dancing rapidly. A magic light level blood fiend entered the range of the silver metal blade. Instantly, wounds appeared on its body under the silver metal blades, and it finally fell to the ground with a loud bang. Poof! A beautiful young woman from the Chaos Temple wore a pair of silver-white boxing gloves. She punched the ground fiercely, and then a large number of earth spikes appeared on the ground in front of her. These earth spikes were not made of rocks but of metal. They were silver-gray in color, and there was lightning flashing on their surface. A magic light level blood fiend was pierced by these earth spikes, and dozens of holes appeared on its body. It emitted charred marks, and after struggling for a while, it finally died. Among the Chaos Temple's disciples, there were more than 10 people who displayed combat power that was not inferior to the performance of Gray's group of 4. Moreover, there were a few people who displayed combat power that surpassed Gray's group of 4. Die! Julio roared. He slashed out with his sword, and dozens of green-gold lights shot out. The 3 magic light-level void beasts in front of him were cut into hundreds of pieces by the green-gold lights. Boom! The Chaos Saint's son Alger's silver hair fluttered. His body had an elegant feeling. He was the only person among the young generation of the Chaos Temple and the top families who did not team up with others. An Annihilation-class void beast leaped toward him. In a very short amount of time, his right hand became a giant battle knife. The battle knife was wrapped with green-gold light. It had a scary presence. He quickly slashed at the Annihilation-class void beast that was coming toward him. Poof! The Annihilation-class void beast, whose body was 50 meters long, was cut in half by his knife. He had killed an Annihilation-class void beast in one hit. Without a doubt, he was the most dazzling person among the young generation of the Chaos Temple and the top families. I can't believe the Chaos Saint's son is this strong. Gray and the other 3 looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. He had killed an Annihilation-class void beast in one hit. His opponent's battle power had not only reached Annihilation class, but it had surpassed the normal Annihilation class. He was only a few years older than them, but he already had such power. It shocked them. His battle power is much stronger than the Light Saint. The other party was not the first Holy Son or Saintess-level genius that Gray had come into contact with. Before this, Gray had come into contact with the Saintess of Light and even fought with her. The combat strength that the other party had displayed was much, much stronger than the Saintess of Light. Of course, it did not mean that the Light Saint was weaker than the Chaos Saint's son. The Light Saint that Gray had encountered was severely suppressed by the plane's rules. Her power was less than 10%. She was not at her best. Otherwise, Gray would not have been able to survive. In terms of destructive power, I am not as good as him. Gray seriously compared himself to his opponent. He realized that in terms of destructive power, his opponent was definitely stronger than him. Although they both mastered rule power, his opponent's realm was obviously several levels higher than his. Naturally, his battle power was stronger than his. Unless he could unearth the space-time ability attack formed by time ability and rule power, he would not be as good as his opponent in terms of destructive power. However, if I fight with all my strength, I might not lose to him. Destructive power was destructive power. Fighting was fighting. The two were not equal. The stronger one's destructive power was, the less likely one would win the battle. Although Gray's destructive power was not as good as his opponent's, he had many more tricks up his sleeve. Time rule power and space rule power gave him many more tricks. Space barrier could provide him with strong defense. Teleportation could provide him with the ability to get close to his opponent in an instant. Time rule power could provide him with terrifying movement speed and the ability to deprive his opponent of lifespan. With all these tricks combined, he might not lose to his opponent. It wasn't just the younger generation that couldn't help but look at the sacred son of chaos. Even the older generation looked at the sacred son of chaos in amazement. He is only 30 years old, and his power is already greater than ours. Compared to him, we have lived for more than 1,000 years for nothing. An Annihilation class elite from a top-class family side. The growth speed of the Chaos Saint is not slower than the Saint's. In the future, maybe, an Annihilation class elite from the Chaos Holy Palace looked forward to it. If there were 2 Saints in one Holy Palace, then the Holy Palace would become more prosperous than ever. Rumble, 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 boom. The younger generation competed with each other. The battle continued. Scary explosions kept ringing out. Many void beasts were killed. At the same time, the top-class families and even the Chaos Holy Palace had people injured or killed. Puff! Dozens of thick tentacles were as sharp as spears. A magic light warrior could not dodge in time. He was pierced by one of the tentacles. A hole appeared in his body. His body quickly turned black. Catcha! A giant mouth bit down. A magic light warrior could not dodge in time. He was swallowed. After chewing a few times, there was a scream and the sound of bones breaking. He was swallowed. Poochie! A red pillar of light swept across. A few magic light warriors could not dodge in time. Their bodies were vaporized. Puff! An Annihilation class elite could not dodge in time. He was hit by a high-level Annihilation class Void Beast's blue light. His body was broken and sent flying. He was not going to survive. As long as there was a fight, there would be death. It did not matter if it was the Chaos Holy Palace or the top-class families. There were people dying. Gray had already lost contact with the 5 magic light warriors. Clearly, the 5 magic light warriors had died in battle. Chapter 713. Screech. A magic light void beast that was only 30 feet long and had a scary presence. It was not far from Annihilation class. It roared and attacked Gray and the other 3. Pang! Pang! 2 giant, silver-gray hands appeared and slammed into its body. While its skin and flesh were torn open, its body was pressed down. Chi! 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 Black mist appeared and wrapped around its 4 legs. It corroded its 4 legs and bound them. So. Landrine Gomo and George Lopez rushed out. One of them had a battle knife wrapped in dark green wind and a sharp demonic sound. The other had a sword that was covered in a golden light. Pooh! Pooh! The 2 of them kept attacking the bound void beast. The bound void beast kept getting more and more serious wounds. The bound void beast struggled fiercely, but under the double bind of Blanca-Mandy and Gray, it could not move. Clang! In the end, the void beast screeched unwillingly and fell to the ground. Its body started to dissipate quickly. The 4 of them quickly moved on to their next target. A few hours later, it was almost evening. The setting sun was like blood. It scattered a blood-like light, shining on the blood-stained ground. The battle was finally coming to an end. All of the void beasts had been killed. There was only one void beast that was still alive. It was a giant void beast that was more than 90 feet long. The giant void beast looked like a hedgehog, but its body did not have thorns. Instead, it had many tentacles. Where there should have been thorns, they were replaced by thick tentacles. This was the largest and most powerful void beast that had invaded. It had reached the terrifying 6th level of Annihilation class and was infinitely close to Rule class. Fortunately, it had been discovered early. It had not had the time to consume life before it was discovered. If it had been like when the Void disaster first broke out, it would have taken almost 10 days to gather people. With such a long time, this void beast could have grown into a void beast that was comparable to a Rule-class void beast. When that happened, it would have been an unimaginably horrible disaster. Now, the giant creature was fighting 3 Chaos Holy Hall elites and 3 people from the 3 most powerful families. The 6 of them were all 6th-tier Annihilation class elite. Gray and the other magic light warriors, as well as most of the Annihilation elites, retreated far away. They nervously watched the fight. In a battle of this level, not only were the magic light warriors unable to help, but even ordinary Annihilation class elites were unable to help. Only the 6 of them had the ability to fight against this void beast. Puff, puff, puff. In the Chaos Temple, there was a man with a cross-shaped scar on his face. His left and right hands had turned into giant blades that were wrapped in green-gold light. As he slashed, one thick tentacle after another was chopped off. In the Manti family, a middle-aged man stood on top of a burly giant. Compared to the giant that Blanca-Manti had created with his ability, this giant was even more burly. Its height had reached an extremely exaggerated height of 80 meters. Thick tentacles attacked the giant, and from the giant's body, giant hands grew one after another. They went to meet the thick tentacles and blocked them one by one. The attacks of the two people had restrained most of the Void Beast's energy. The Void Beast had no time to care about anything else. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, the other two elites from the Chaos Holy Hall, as well as the elites from the Ngumo family and the Lopez family, made their move. Violent attacks hit the hedgehog-like Void Beast. Puff, puff, puff. Under the violent and terrifying attacks, the hedgehog-like giant Void Beast's body suddenly had hideous wounds. Its giant body was like the ground that had been violently bombed. It was full of crisscrossing wounds. Screech! The hedgehog-like giant Void Beast suddenly roared angrily. Its mouth spat out a blue light to attack the four people. The many tentacles on its body also attacked the four people. Boom, boom, boom. The many tentacles were blocked by the cross-scarred man from the Chaos Holy Hall and the middle-aged man from the Manti family. The light beams were also blocked by the four people. Once again, the attacks landed on the hedgehog-like giant Void Beast's body. Even if it was just the aftermath, it had already caused drastic changes to the landscape. Mountains collapsed, rivers stopped flowing, and the ground caved in. Some of the onlookers were hit by the aftershocks and vomited blood as they flew backward, forcing the onlookers to retreat again and again to avoid the aftershocks. Rumble. After fighting for an hour, the sky had completely darkened. The purple moon hung in the sky. The battle had finally ended. The hedgehog-like giant Void Beast fell to the ground. The 6th grade annihilation grades who were fighting were all injured. Their faces showed signs of fatigue. For someone as powerful as them to show signs of fatigue, one could imagine how difficult the battle had been. It's finally dead. Seeing that the hedgehog-like giant Void Beast had been killed, the onlookers breathed a sigh of relief. They all went forward to size up this giant terrifying grade Void Beast. What a huge body! Gray and the other three also walked forward to take a look. They stood beside the gigantic Void Beast's corpse and sized it up. It was as if they were standing at the foot of a mountain and looking up at the peak of a mountain. A sense of awe arose spontaneously. Other than the legendary Void Beast that was comparable to rule-bending Void Beast, this is definitely the biggest Void Beast. Blanca Manti said with a sigh. It shouldn't be far from rule-bending Void Beast. Otherwise, it wouldn't have required 6th grade annihilation grades to work together. George Lopez reached out to touch the Void Beast's body. He felt that although it was made of mist, its body was stronger than alloy. He was shocked. I hope that one day, we'll have the power to fight such a giant beast. Landry and Ngumo's eyes were filled with a strong desire. Such a giant Void Beast. I wonder how big its crystal core is? Gray's eyes were looking at the Void Beast's body with a burning passion. It was as if he could see the giant crystal core inside the Void Beast. Of course, he was just looking at it. He did not dare to snatch it. Snatching it in front of 6th grade annihilation grades was no different from committing suicide. Suddenly, a strange vibration appeared. Under the purple moonlight, the empty space next to the giant Void Beast's body that was dissipating began to ripple like water. The vibration was extremely intense. In an instant it had vibrated dozens of times. The void was like the surface of a drum that was being beaten. What happened? They had never encountered such a strange phenomenon before. It made everyone confused. However, their instincts of danger urged them to leave this place as soon as possible. They subconsciously retreated. Gotcha! At this moment there was a crisp sound. The void suddenly turned pitch black. From this pitch-black darkness, dozens of giant tentacles stretched out. Each of them was 100 meters long and as thick as a house. As soon as they appeared, it was as if they had grown eyes. They attacked the people who were retreating. A few tentacles whipped toward the retreating magic light warriors. Dozens of magic light warriors were hit. They were turned into meat paste. The meat paste suddenly turned pitch black. It was as if something had been absorbed in an instant. A few tentacles whipped toward a few annihilation grades. Although the annihilation grades used their fastest speed to dodge, they were still unable to dodge. They were hit. Their bodies became broken and incomplete. Before they hit the ground, they were pitch black and dried up. Pang, pang, pang. 6 tentacles attacked the 6 6th-grade annihilation grades from Chaos Holy Palace. The 6 of them used their skills to defend, but they were all sent flying. Although they did not die, they were injured. Hula, a thick tentacle attacked Chaos Holy Sun Alger. Chaos Holy Sun Alger's presence suddenly exploded. It increased by 2 levels. He must have used a blood skill and a legacy weapon. His left and right hands became giant blades. The edges of the giant blades were green and gold. They slashed toward the incoming tentacles. Blurred. The 2 giant blades' green and gold light dispersed. A scary impact went through the 2 giant blades and into Chaos Holy Sun Alger. Chaos Holy Sun Alger coughed up blood and was sent flying. Although he was severely injured, he blocked the attack. He did not die on the spot. Hula, a thick tentacle swept toward Gray and the others. The tentacle was as thick as a house. It was like a mountain. It swept toward Gray and the others. It was getting bigger in their eyes. Despair appeared on everyone's faces. Many of them did not want to give up. They had survived. It was over. They did not expect something like this to happen at the very last moment. Chapter 7:14. Hula. The tentacle, which was as big as a house, kept getting bigger. Gray's hair stood on end. The sense of danger gave him goosebumps. He did not care if he was exposed or not. In the face of a life-or-death crisis, he reflexively put up a space shield in front of him. It was the power that gave him the most sense of security, so he used it without thinking. The moment he put up the space shield, the tentacle, which was as big as a house, was only inches away from him. It hit the invisible space shield. The space shield was a shield made of space power. It was one of the sturdiest things in the world, but the tentacle, which was as big as a house, was not simple. Even a 6th-tier Annihilation class elite could not block the attack. They were all injured and sent flying. One could only imagine how powerful the tentacle, which was as big as a house, was. Boom! The tentacle, which was as big as a house, hit the invisible space shield. It was a collision between an extremely scary item and a sturdy object that was rarely seen. Catcha! There was a crisp sound. In Gray's eyes, the invisible space shield had countless cracks on it. In the end, there was a catcha sound. It was completely broken. The space shield, which had never been broken since it was created, had been broken. The strength of the power was related to the user's level. The space shield was special, which was why it had such a strong defense. Because Gray's level was only the 3rd tier of magic light, it could not compare to a real space shield. Facing an attack that even a 6th-tier Annihilation class elite could not block, it was unable to block it. It was broken. Pang, pang, pang. The tentacle, which was as big as a house, swept across Gray, Blanca Mandy, George Lopez, Landrine Gummo, and many other magic light warriors. Everyone spat out blood as they were sent flying. They landed heavily on the ground. Cough, cough. They are not dead. The shock from the landing made George Lopez's internal injuries even more serious. He spat out a mouthful of blood, but his face was filled with ecstasy. He had seen an Annihilation class elite die under the giant tentacle, which was as big as a house. The body was broken and black. Even an Annihilation class elite could not escape. He did not think he could escape. He had been desperate, but he did not expect to escape with his life. It shouldn't be. The saber in Landrine Gummo's hand had already flown to an unknown location. He struggled to sit up from the ground. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. According to his estimation, he was definitely going to die, but the result was completely out of his expectations. He was actually lucky enough to survive. The power of the tentacle is weaker than expected. No, it's not that the power of the tentacle is weaker than expected, but the power of the tentacle that attacked us is weaker than expected. Her red lips were stained with blood, and Blanca Mandy's face was full of shock. She felt that it was too strange for her to survive this time. Her gaze swept across Landrine Gomo, George Lopez, and Gray to check on their condition. When she saw Gray, she could not help but squint her eyes. The other party's clothes were tattered, and the surface of his body was filled with a silver-gray luster. He must have used some kind of metallization ability. This wasn't what surprised her. What surprised her was that there wasn't a single wound on the other party's body. Under the attack just now, he wasn't injured at all. Could it be? A light suddenly flashed in her head. She connected the strangeness of the giant tentacle attack and the strangeness of Gray's body. She came to a shocking conclusion. Under the attack of the giant tentacle that was like a house, even an Annihilation Tier 6 elite could not help but be injured. It was not hard to imagine that the giant tentacle that was like a house was extremely powerful. The tentacle that was so powerful, but when it hit them, its power was very ordinary. She then connected it to Gray being unharmed. She could not help but have a suspicion. The reason the giant tentacle that was like a house was so weak was because before that, Gray had used some kind of method to weaken its power. If he had the ability to weaken the giant tentacle that was like a house, he naturally had the ability to block the aftermath of the attack. Because of that, the other party was not injured at all. Is it him or not? Looking at Gray, Blanca Mandy's eyes were filled with shock. She didn't dare to confirm this conjecture, because the conclusion of this conjecture was too inconceivable. Even an Annihilation Tier 6 elite could not block the attack, but the other party had somehow blocked it without being injured. This kind of thing was too unbelievable. It was almost unbelievable. So, she was not sure if this guess was correct or not. Feeling Blanca Mandy's eyes on him, Gray's heart jumped. He knew that his current situation was very obvious. After all, everyone else was injured. He was the only one who was not injured. There was nothing he could do. When the danger came, he was afraid that his defense was not strong enough. So, he used all the defense he could. He did not think about looking too weird. At this moment, dozens of huge tentacles launched another wave of attacks. Immediately, another thick tentacle swept towards them. Blanca Mandy couldn't care less about Gray anymore. Enduring the injuries on her body, she hurriedly retreated. Her current position was still within the attack range of the giant tentacle. She wasn't sure if she could survive the attack like before. Of course, Gray did not care about hiding. After he put up the defense shield in front of him, he quickly retreated. But he knew the defense of the space shield, so he was able to retreat relatively easily. The space shield was enough to block most of the giant tentacle's destructive power. The remaining destructive power was not enough to hurt him. So, he did not plan on using any rule powers other than the space shield. Retreat. Retreat. In the first wave of attack, more than a dozen Annihilation elites and more than 40 Magic Light warriors had died under the attack. Now, the second wave of attack was coming. The people who were lucky enough to survive suddenly looked pale. They quickly retreated. But their speed of retreat was not as fast as the giant tentacle. The tentacle that was as thick as a house seemed to have eyes. Every tentacle was heading toward the strong or the large number of people. In the sky far away, a shadow was flying toward them. It was a shadow that was shrouded in green and gold light. One moment it was in the sky and the next moment it was right in front of them. Seeing the dozens of giant tentacles attacking the crowd, the shadow that was shrouded in green and gold light coldly grunted. It let out a majestic sound. Then, streaks of green and gold light shot out like sharp swords, attacking the dozens of giant tentacles. Poof, poof, poof. Under the green and gold light, the dozens of giant tentacles that were as thick as houses were easily cut off like bubbles. They were all broken neatly. Boom, boom, boom. The broken tentacles that were as thick as houses hit the ground. There was a loud boom on the ground. It even made the ground shake. Not dead? I am not dead? A magic light warrior opened his eyes. His face was full of disbelief. He thought he was going to die. After all, he had seen the giant tentacles crush an annihilation class elite. With his magic light class power, he did not think he could escape. In desperation, he closed his eyes and waited for death. He did not expect that death would not come. Instead, there was the sound of giant objects falling to the ground. When he opened his eyes, he saw dozens of tentacles that were as big as houses falling to the ground. The ends of the tentacles were cut off neatly. What just happened? A magic light warrior looked confused. He was so scared that he did not even notice what had just happened. When he realized what had happened, the dozens of tentacles that were as thick as houses had already fallen to the ground. He looked at his friend next to him. He noticed that the other person was looking at the sky. He followed the other person's gaze and saw that in the sky, a shadow was floating in the air. The other person's body was shrouded in green and gold light. He could not see the other person's face, but there was a strong presence about him. He had an innate nobility. There were no wings on his back, and he was not walking in the air, but the other person was still floating in the air. It defied common sense. It was like no rule in the world could affect the other person's body. His face was frozen. His entire body was frozen. It was not just him. At this moment, more and more people were looking at the sky. Their bodies were frozen just like him. They were looking at the cold shadow in the sky. Is he? Gray was one of the many people. He removed the space barrier. His breathing was heavy as he looked at the shadow in the sky. The giant tentacle's power was something that even a 6th-tier annihilation class elite would be injured. Even the space barrier that he created with his space power would be broken. Under the attack of the person in the sky, it was all broken in an instant. His power was far beyond the 6th-tier annihilation class. His power was far beyond the 6th-tier annihilation class. He had reached a higher level. Above the 6th-tier annihilation class, there was only one level. That was rule class. Saint Randy! It is Saint Randy! At this moment, someone from Chaos Holy Palace screamed. His voice was filled with passion and worship. It was not just the younger generation that had such passion and worship. Even some of the older generation's eyes were filled with passion and worship. Even the 6th-tier annihilation class elites could not help but respectfully call him Saint Randy. Saint? It really is a rule class elite. Gray's eyes looked very excited. Saint was a title for rule class elite. Because their life level had undergone a fundamental change, they went from being mortal to becoming a saint. They had an extremely long lifespan. They had the power to break rules. That was why they were called saints. If the other person was called a saint, he had to be a rule class elite. He was most likely the rule class elite from Chaos Holy Palace. After all, this was Chaos Holy Palace's territory. Chapter 7:15. It's Saint Randy. Not far from Gray, Blancamandy, George Lopez, and Landrine Gomo also looked at the figure in the sky with excitement in their eyes. Rule-level contenders were super contenders who had the terrifying power to control and change the natural order. However, they either cultivated in the depths of the holy sanctum or looked for opportunities in some dangerous places. They rarely appeared in front of the world. Even if it was the holy sanctum, most of the people who entered the holy sanctum might not even be able to see a saint until they died, let alone these non-holy sanctum forces. Now that they were lucky enough to see one could imagine how excited they were. Not good, the broken tentacle is growing back. Everyone looked at Saint Randy in the sky, temporarily forgetting about the void hole and the giant tentacle. Finally, an annihilation-level contender noticed that something was wrong. He looked at the severed tentacle and could not help but change his expression. The severed tentacle was rapidly growing back. Now it had recovered more than half. Soon it should be fully recovered. Go back. In the sky, Saint Randy, who was shrouded in greenish-golden light, began to move. First, a majestic voice sounded, followed by a huge greenish-golden ray of light that cut off a large number of tentacles. It then slashed towards the dark void. Boom! The greenish-gold light slashed into the dark void hole. Then, a muffled sound came from the dark void hole. Then, all the giant tentacles quickly retreated into the dark void hole and disappeared from this world. Whoosh! Saint Randy, who was covered in greenish-gold light, appeared beside the dark void hole. Then, he went directly into the void hole and went to the other side of the void zone. He's killed his way into the void zone. Gray's eyes widened. He knew the situation in the void zone. There was no suitable air for breathing, and there was no place to stay. It was pitch black. Other than the void beasts, it was a land of death for all life. Even annihilation-level contenders could not survive in such a place. However, Saint Randy did not hesitate to kill his way into the void zone. Since the other party dared to do so, he must have the ability to survive in the void zone. Saint-level contenders were indeed extraordinary contenders who could control and break the natural order. They could even survive in the void zone, a land of death. Boom, boom, boom. Within the void there was a terrifying commotion. Even the void was slightly distorted. One could imagine how big the commotion on the other side was. It was obvious that Saint Randy was already fighting with the gigantic void beast. What a huge commotion! Even the void is trembling. George Lopez stared unblinkingly into the void, though it was so dark that he could see nothing. The battle hasn't ended even after such a long time. In other words, Saint Randy doesn't have an absolute advantage. The void beast on the other side of the void is indeed comparable to a nomological void beast. Blanca Mantai's face was full of fear. Regarding the power of the giant void beast on the other side of the space hole, many people were already guessing. Just one tentacle was able to injure a 6th-tier annihilation elite. The giant void beast on the other side of the space hole was probably a rule-class void beast. Furthermore, after Saint Randy entered the void zone, he did not manage to take down this super-colossal void beast immediately. Instead, a continuous battle broke out, which further proved this point. After all, only someone at the nomological level could contend with a nomological contender. It must be a nomological void beast. Landrine Gomo agreed with a serious expression. He felt a wave of fear and relief that he had survived the attack of a nomological void beast. Will it be a match? Gray frowned as he stared at the pitch-black void without a single ray of light. In the origin world, Saint Randy had the absolute advantage. He had easily cut off the giant void beast's tentacles and chased it back to the void zone. However, in the void zone, it was hard to say whether Saint Randy would still have the upper hand. The combat power displayed by those tentacles that were as thick as a house was definitely not the full combat power of the giant void beast on the other side of the void zone. It was obvious that the other party was unable to come to this world due to its enormous size, so it could not unleash its full power. In the void zone, the other party would be able to unleash its full combat power, and its combat power would definitely skyrocket. Saint Randy might not be able to gain the upper hand. Sir Saint Randy, on the Chaos Temple's side, many people clenched their fists and stared at the void zone. There was a faint trace of anxiety on their faces. Obviously, Gray's worries were unfounded. Even some people from the Chaos Temple had the same worry. More than half an hour later, boom, accompanied by a sharp roar that seemed to be able to shatter the void, the battle came to a stop. Everyone could not help but look at the void that had shrunk by more than half, and their hearts were filled with anxiety. Of course, everyone had retreated far away to a place where the 100-meter-long giant tentacles could not attack. They were prepared to turn and flee if anything went wrong. Swoosh! In the void zone, a ray of light flashed, and then a figure shrouded in greenish-gold light reappeared in the sky. It was Saint Randy. It's Saint Randy. Saint Randy has returned from the void zone. Saint Randy has won. Many people heaved a sigh of relief. If the winner was that super-large void beast, one could imagine what kind of disaster it would be. Fortunately, such a thing did not happen, and the final winner was Saint Randy. Sir Randy, that void beast should be the source of this void disaster. How is it? In the Chaos Temple, the man with the cross-shaped scar on his face asked worriedly. Judging from the sudden appearance of the void zone, this void disaster was obviously not a coincidence. Instead, it was caused by a Maxim void beast breaking through the world barrier. As long as this void beast was still alive, the void disaster would not end. Don't worry, I've already killed that Maxim void beast. Saint Randy shook his head and said. After this void zone disappeared, there shouldn't be another void zone. Hearing Saint Randy's answer, the man with the cross-shaped scar on his face heaved a sigh of relief. The others who heard it, including Gray, were inexplicably shocked. It's really a Maxim void beast, and it's already been killed by Saint Randy? They had witnessed the death of a Maxim void beast with their own eyes. Although this Maxim void beast was not a human, it was still a Maxim void beast after all. Could still bring them great shock. To be able to kill a Maxim void beast without being injured, this Saint Randy's strength should not be as simple as an ordinary Maxim void beast. I wonder if he has mastered a second Maxim? Looking at Saint Randy, who was shrouded in the greenish-golden light in the sky, Gray guessed in his heart that his face couldn't be seen clearly. Similarly, a Maxim void beast had not reached the end of the road. After reaching this level, one could still become stronger by mastering more Maxim void beasts. Of course, mastering more Maxim void beasts was extremely difficult. Except for special circumstances like Gray's, under normal circumstances, mastering one Maxim void beasts was already extremely difficult, let alone mastering multiple Maxim void beasts. Suddenly, Gray met a pair of eyes. It was a pair of greenish-gold eyes with dignity and nobility, just like a god. It was Saint Randy. I'm not the only one looking at him. Why is he looking at me? In an instant, Gray's hair stood on end. His scalp was numb, his heart was beating wildly, and his body was completely stiff. He was sure that the other party was looking at him at this moment. This shocked and puzzled him at the same time. There were many people looking at the other party. Why would the other party notice him? Could it be that he can sense the Maxim void beasts on me? Or did he sense it when I used the spatial barrier earlier? Cold sweat slid down Gray's forehead. His understanding of the Maxim void beasts was too limited. He was completely unable to determine why the other party had noticed him. He wanted to use teleportation to escape, but his intuition told him that even if he used teleportation, it would be too late. In front of the other party, he did not even have the time to use teleportation. As for the spatial barrier, it would definitely not be able to stop the other party. After all, the spatial barrier that he could hold up now could not even block one of the Maxim void beast's tentacles, let alone a Maxim void beast who could kill it. Swoosh! The gaze that fell on Gray paused for a moment before moving away. Then, Saint Randy turned into a greenish-gold light and disappeared into the sky. Shoo! When the gaze on him disappeared, Gray felt like he was about to collapse. His body went limp and almost fell to the ground. The other party must have discovered the Maxim void beasts on him. It was very likely that the other party had discovered it when he used the spatial barrier to protect himself. However, the other party was a Maxim void beasts after all. His breadth of mind and vision were not on the same level as ordinary people. Although he had noticed that Gray was unusual, he obviously had no intention of delving into it. In the other party's eyes, even an affinity physique was probably nothing. Although there were very few people with an affinity physique, there were definitely many who had accumulated over thousands of years. However, there were very few who could truly become Maxim void beasts. Otherwise, there would not be so many temples with only one saint overseeing them. Gray's affinity physique was probably nothing to the other party. That was why the other party did not investigate further after he attracted the other party's attention. Could it be that St. Randy's gaze was on him just now? Blanca-Mandy was shocked to see Gray, who seemed to have collapsed all of a sudden. Just now, St. Randy's gaze had glanced over. Of course, it was only for a very short period of time. Most people might have thought that it was just a casual glance. However, after the incident of luckily surviving, coupled with the fact that Gray seemed to have collapsed all of a sudden, she did not think that it was a casual glance. St. Randy's gaze was probably really on Gray. Her heart was filled with shock and astonishment. Since the other party could attract the attention of St. Randy, it was conceivable that there must be something extraordinary about him. The other party seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog and was full of mystery. Chapter 7:16. Another half an hour passed. The dark space hole was completely closed. The disaster of nothingness was over. For the top families, the Chaos Holy Palace recruitment was over. Some families were happy. Although there were casualties, the losses were not too big. It did not affect the family too much. Some families were sad because Annihilation class elites had died in battle. When the Rule class Void Beast suddenly attacked, more than 10 Annihilation class elites had died. Many Annihilation class elites had died at that time. Annihilation class elites were the foundation of a family. They were the pillars of a top family. Every loss of one was enough to make a top family extremely sad. They were still happy because they were not the worst. The top families that had survived were not the worst. The top families that had suffered the worst were the Urgash family and the Zadi family. The people that the two families had sent had all been killed. Not a single person had survived. The two families were destined to fall. They might not even be able to maintain their status as top families. Although the two families might have had Annihilation class elites in their families and did not come, the two families had suffered a lot of losses. Their former enemies and even their former allies might have taken a bite out of them. The two families might not have been able to survive. We have lost 8 magic light warriors. The Leopold family, the Vega family, and the Urgash family had lost 8 magic light warriors. Although the Annihilation class elites were injured, they did not die. In the end, under the tentacles of the Rule class Void Beast, 3 magic light warriors who had been revived by the revival ability died. The 8 of them could not be revived. After the 8 of them died, their life force and everything else had been absorbed. There was no way they could be revived. It was like people who had been killed by time powers. They could not be revived. Their lifespan had reached the limit. Even if they were revived, they would die immediately. After the big fight, many people were injured. Even those who were not injured were exhausted. Chaos Holy Palace and all the families returned to the Sheeta family's city to rest. They rested for a night. The next day, their fatigue and blood power had recovered. The families started to leave Simon City and return to their own families. The Manti family is ready to leave. I'm here to say goodbye. At the temporary residence of the Leopold family, Blanca-Mandy arrived. She looked at Gray with an obscure gaze. Gray seemed to be shrouded in mist, and she couldn't see through him at all. We're also preparing to leave. Being stared at by Blanca-Mandy, Gray felt a little uncomfortable. Since he had saved Blanca-Mandy and the others with the space barrier yesterday, Blanca-Mandy had been looking at him strangely. He was a little uneasy. He wasn't sure if Blanca-Mandy had noticed anything. Saying goodbye is just one of the reasons. The other reason is to invite you to the Manti family as a guest. You won't refuse, right? Blanca-Mandy took a step forward, and the delicate fragrance of her body clearly entered Gray's nose. With a charming smile on her face, she looked at Gray with a bit of dominance. She did not tell the senior members of the Manti family about Gray's mysteries. After all, it was only her guess. Moreover, she was worried that if the family knew about it, they would have some thoughts. In her heart, she did not want the family to become enemies with him. However, in yesterday's battle, Gray's strength was not inferior to the three of them. This naturally fell into the Manti family's eyes. Coupled with the fact that the Leopold family had unexpectedly defeated the Vika family, the Mandy family had finally started to value the Leopold family, especially the Gray family. Thus, when she proposed to invite the other party to the family as a guest to deepen their relationship, the family easily agreed. She invited Gray to the Manti family as a guest to deepen their relationship. On the other hand, she wanted to see if she could confirm her guess. "Sorry, I'm currently studying alchemy. I really can't find the time." When a beautiful and perfect woman invited him to be a guest, normal people would be very happy to accept. Gray was the same. However, the other party seemed to have noticed something, and he was afraid that too much contact would reveal something. Gray could only regretfully decline. "You're already studying alchemy? Well, next time, you must be a guest at the Manti family." Gray gave an irrefutable reason, and Blanca Manti had to give up. She changed the topic and said with a slightly serious expression, "Be careful when you return this time. I'm afraid that some families have already set their eyes on the Leopold family." "We understand. Thank you for the reminder." Gray nodded and thanked her. After sending Blanca Manti off, Gray's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He naturally had guessed that they would be targeted by other top families on the way back. Regarding this, he naturally had an idea. He would not use his resurrection ability to kill people who had no grudges with him in order to increase his power. However, since they had sent themselves to his door, he naturally would not be polite. After leaving Sid City and the Noah plains that had been destroyed after the battle, Gray and the others rode on the back of the dragon beast and returned to the Leopold family. There were 9 of them when they came, but there were only 7 when they returned. 2 of them did not die in the battle, but they were sent away by Gray and did not return with him. The 2 were not resurrected by his resurrection ability, so Gray could not fully trust them. What he was about to do next could only be done by those he could fully trust. Whoosh, 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 above the sky there was suddenly a whistling sound. Looking up, they immediately saw 6 giant birds whistling and approaching them quickly. The 6 giant birds had different appearances. Some had snow-white feathers, some were pitch black, and some had fiery red feathers. The only similarity was that there were several people on the back of each giant bird. Pung, pung, pung. One by one, people jumped down from the backs of the giant bird. Some blocked the path in front and back of Gray and the others, while others blocked the left and right sides of Gray and the others, completely surrounding Gray's team and the dragon beast. Every one of them was emitting an intense pressure, firmly locking onto Gray's group of 7. Roar! The dragon beast roared uneasily due to the shock, and wanted to run away, but the people in the encirclement acted and immediately stopped it. "Thule family, Downey family, what is the meaning of this?" Fod glanced at the people surrounding them and recognized their identities. He questioned angrily. The Downey family and the Thule family were ranked in the middle of the top families. But with the 2 families appearing together, the threat they brought was not any weaker than a family ranked in the upper class. "We want to borrow something from the Leopold family. Don't worry, once we borrow something, we will leave. We will not make things difficult for you." A beautiful middle-aged woman with crow's feet at the corner of her eyes smiled. "What do you want to borrow?" Fod suppressed his anger and said, 3 heritage weapons." The middle-aged woman's eyes were burning with passion. "What if I don't want to?" Fod's eyes were filled with anger, but he suppressed his anger and said, "That is not up to you." A middle-aged man with extremely fair skin sneered. "If you know what's good for you, hand it over and you can still live. If not, we will have to take it from your corpses." Following his words, waves of murderous intent enveloped Gray's team of 7. It was on the verge of bursting out, as though sharp blades would land on Gray's team in the next moment. "You want to borrow something from us? Coincidentally, I also have something to borrow from you." At this moment, Gray spoke, looking at the middle-aged man with a slightly mocking gaze. Junior, do you have the right to speak here? Hearing Gray's sudden words, the middle-aged man with fair skin was first stunned, then he sneered and looked at Gray with contempt, his face full of disdain. I have no right to speak? A playful smile appeared on Gray's face. I think among everyone here, I am the most qualified to speak to you. And you better listen to what I want to borrow from you. Oh, elder sister is a little curious. What do you want to borrow from us? The middle-aged woman was full of smiles. Although she called herself elder sister, in fact, she was at least a few hundred years older than Gray. Being Gray's grandmother was too old. Your lives. Gray had a smile on his face, but his words were full of murderous intent. You're courting death. The middle-aged man with fair skin was furious. With a wave of his hand, a purple thunderbolt attacked Gray. Although it was only as thick as an arm, it condensed an extremely terrifying thunderbolt. Even a fifth-level existence of magic light would not be able to block it. Purring, Gray was unharmed. When the purple thunderbolt approached him, it crashed into an invisible space barrier and collapsed with a loud bang. The middle-aged man with fair skin was slightly surprised. His opponent had actually used some method to block his attack. This really surprised him. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly paused. He saw a ruined ship and 3 giant birds rapidly approaching. Then, many people jumped down from the ship and surrounded them, looking at them with unkind expressions. Vega clan, Yuga's clan, what are you doing? They had just surrounded the Leopold clan and did not expect that they would be surrounded by even more people soon. Feeling the unfriendly gazes on him, the middle-aged man with fair skin suddenly felt that something was wrong. You are here for the heritage weapon? It's a misunderstanding. The heritage weapon is still with them, not with us. We are willing to withdraw from the fight. The middle-aged woman also hurriedly said. Withdraw? That won't do. After all, we are responding to Lord Gray's call to take your lives. The young man, Joshua, shook his head with a cold smile on his face. You still want to withdraw? Dream on. You have offended Lord Gray. Today, none of you can leave. The hunchbacked old man, Jerome, also laughed coldly. You, who are you? The middle-aged woman, the middle-aged man with fair skin, and the other members of the Downey and Tully clans all looked at Gray in disbelief. The 2 top clans were actually obeying each other's orders. This caused them to be shocked, and frightened. At the same time, they felt regret in their hearts. This Leopold clan was really too strange. It was obviously not something that the 2 clans could take down. But now, there was no longer any time for regret. I am the one who wants your lives. Gray ordered with a cold smile. Attack. Following his orders, the people of the Leopold clan, Vega clan, and Yuga's clan all pounced on the Tully clan and Downey clan. With far more people than the 2 clans, they pounced on the 2 clans. Chapter 717. Without much surprise, the Tully family and the Downey family were all wiped out, including the Annihilation Elite. Gray did not even use the 4 Annihilation class blood beasts, because there was no need to. Without realizing it, Gray had a very powerful faction. The Leopold family, the Vika family, and the Urgas family had a total of 10 Annihilation class elite. The Tully family and the Downey family only had 5 Annihilation class elite. There was a difference of 2. Plus, there was Gray. The Tully family and the Downey family had no chance of escaping. He used his resurrection power. In the end, 5 Annihilation classes and 30 Magic Light classes were resurrected. The others were badly damaged, so they could not be resurrected. In addition to the people from the 2 families, the number of people who had been resurrected by Gray had reached a terrifying number. There were 15 Annihilation classes and 70 Magic Light classes. That was a scary number, but it still did not reach the upper limit of his resurrection power. Super memory had a scary effect on his resurrection power. Even now, it had not reached the limit. Even Gray was shocked. The Urgas family, the Vika family, the Tully family, and the Downey family hid. Gray and the Leopold family continued their journey, but there were no more attacking families. He ordered the families to return. Gray rowed the Urgas family's ruined ship. He was going to head to the Urgas family. The Tulii family and the Donny family were two middle-class families. The Urgas family was one of the top families. They had a rich collection. Gray was not going to miss it. 3 days later, the Urgas family's ruined ship was under a giant umbrella. Gray was happily drinking black tea. There were maids of the Urgas family serving him. Because they had such a giant ruined ship, the Urgas family would not mistreat themselves. They sent many maids to take care of the ruined ship. Outside there was a thick forest. Many of the giant trees were 100 meters tall or even a few hundred meters tall. They were in the forbidden forest. The path to the Urgas family required them to go through the forbidden forest. They were on that path. I control 5 top-class families. Although my power is not as strong as the 3 most powerful families with 6th-tier annihilation elites, I am still the strongest under the 3 most powerful families. Looking at the dense forest below, Gray fell into deep thought. It's a pity that the territories of the 5 top clans are far apart from each other. It's very difficult for them to help each other. It's even difficult for them to send messages. It's very difficult for them to unite. The reason why the Chaos Temple was able to quickly spread the news to the various top clans was because of the magic rune machine, which allowed them to communicate with each other. However, this method wouldn't work between top clans. This magic runic machine could only transmit information to the Chaos Temple or receive information from the Chaos Temple. It couldn't transmit information between top clans. If you want to connect the 5 families, there's no need to think about using the magic script machine. The various holy temples are tightly controlled, so it's impossible to obtain the relevant technology or items. Other than that, what other methods are there? Gray's right hand subconsciously touched his chin. Suddenly, a light flashed in his head. He thought of an ability. Now, Gray was very familiar with the soul, element, and body. There were 35 basic powers in the 3 categories. He knew the specialty of each power. According to what he knew, among the 35 powers, one of them had the ability to communicate over a long distance. To be more accurate, that power had the ability to control things over a long distance. Communicating over a long distance was not the specialty of that power. Controlling things over a long distance was the specialty of that power. That power was called a puppet power. It was one of the soul powers. It was very rare, but it was also very powerful. In some ways, that power was similar to the resurrection power. That power could not resurrect a dead creature. It could enslave a creature's mind and soul. It could turn the creature into a puppet. Even if the creature was far away, it could still be controlled from a long distance. Because of the similarity between that power and the resurrection power, Gray had been searching for the blood of a calamity-grade blood fiend with that power. He wanted to see if he could fuse that power with the resurrection power. However, blood fiends with spiritual abilities were rare to begin with. Just like last time, the blood essence of the Phantom Fox had actually caused a conflict between Gray and a large family. This was evident from this. Furthermore, this puppet power was very rare even among blood fiends with soul powers. It was even more difficult to find. Therefore, although he had been searching for it, he had not been able to find it. Now, he could not help but think of that power again. With the long-distance control of that power, if it could really be fused with the resurrection power, he should be able to contact the resurrected person even if they were far away. I wonder if we can gather the power of the 5 great families to search for that blood? Picking up the black tea, Gray took a sip. Now, he could only hope that the 5 families had the ability to find the blood of this blood fiend. As for searching for it in the Forbidden Forest, it would be no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. He would not do that. Whoosh whoosh. In the dense Forbidden Forest, there were very few human footprints. However, at this moment, under the rune ship, there was a big chase. A young man was injured in many places. Blood had almost soaked his clothes. He was panting heavily as he ran with all his might. He was using the tall trees to block the people chasing behind him. It could be seen that his body was slightly exhausted. He was completely relying on his willpower to run. Behind him, there were 3 people chasing after him. The 3 of them were wearing the same uniform and should belong to the same force. Humph! Among the 3 people, a cold-looking middle-aged man snorted and slashed out with his sword. A dark green fog quickly spread forward. Any life that it encountered melted under the dark green fog. It seemed that it was going to engulf the young man in front of it. The young man in front was already slightly exhausted. After feeling the movement behind him, he turned around with difficulty and waved the spear in his hand. Under his spear, a purple flame appeared and turned into a wall of flames. It burned the dark green fog to nothing. A strong explosion and a flaming hurricane temporarily blocked the 3 people. It temporarily blocked the 3 people chasing after him. However, his face was even paler. He bit his lips until they bled. He forced himself to stay alert and ran forward. However, he had not run far before the 3 people broke through the flaming hurricane and chased after him. After running for a few hundred meters, the young man finally slowed down due to the excessive blood loss. His physical strength was exhausted. Taking this opportunity, the 3 people chasing after him finally stopped him and surrounded him. "Accept your fate. You can't escape." Blocking the way, the cold-looking middle-aged man said with a cold expression. The young man who was surrounded felt despair. The large amount of blood in his body made him extremely exhausted. He knew that he would most likely die here today. After running for more than a month, he did not expect that he would not be able to escape death in the end. In his mind, a beautiful figure appeared. He was not afraid of death, but if he died like this, she would probably be very sad. Thinking of this, he forced himself to stay alert. The remaining power of blood was poured into the spear. The long spear was covered in purple flames. Holding the long spear that was wrapped in purple flames, he stabbed at the cold-looking middle-aged man like an arrow. He wanted to knock the cold-looking middle-aged man away. Clang! The cold-looking middle-aged man's long saber was wrapped in a dark green mist. He blocked the spear and forced the young man to retreat slightly. "If you were in your best condition, I might be a little afraid. But now you should accept your fate. You will die today." After forcing the young man to retreat, the cold-looking middle-aged man sneered. The young man was not weak. If it was a one-on-one, none of the 3 people were confident that they could take him down. However, facing the 3 of them, the young man had not only used up a large amount of his power of blood, he was also injured. Even if it was a one-on-one, the other party was no match for him. Why are we talking nonsense with him? Let's kill him quickly. After chasing him for more than a month, we are exhausted. This time we can finally end it. A short man said impatiently. "Do it. Don't give him a chance to recover. He has mastered a blood skill. If his power of blood recovers to the point where he can use it, it will be troublesome." The other man's eyes were a little gloomy as he spoke. The 3 of them closed in on the young man, preventing him from suddenly escaping. They did not want to give him a chance to escape. Revenge. "I'm afraid this young man won't be able to escape." Hundreds of meters in the sky, on the ruined ship of the Urgash family, many people looked at the chase below with interest. They did not have any intention of saving the young man. The Urgash family was not a kind family. Otherwise, they would not have done something like snatching the inherited weapon. They were not related to the young man, so naturally, they would not save him. Gray also had no intention of saving him. It was not worthwhile to provoke a family for a stranger. Although there were few families that could threaten him with his current strength, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Standing beside the railing of the ruined ship, he looked down calmly. Puff! At this moment, the 3 of them attacked the young man together. Although the young man dodged the attack and blocked the attack, He was slashed by the saber. Blood splattered all over his body as he flew backward. What? Gray's eyes suddenly widened, revealing a shocked expression. With a flip, he jumped down from the ruined ship. From a height of hundreds of meters, he fell vertically like a meteor. The moment the young man was sent flying backward, he saw the face of the young man being chased clearly. The young man being chased was Francis, who had come to the origin world with him. The origin world was too vast and boundless. Even a rule-level powerhouse would not dare to say that their footprints covered every corner of the origin world. He did not have much hope of finding the three of them, so he did not let his subordinates search for them. He did not expect to meet them again under such circumstances. Chapter 7:18. Boom! Gray's body smashed down like a meteorite, creating a crater in the forest and causing the ground to shake. Such a commotion naturally alarmed the three people besieging Francis. They temporarily gave up on besieging Francis and looked at Gray warily. They naturally noticed the ruined ship in the sky. They were originally worried that the other party would interfere, but they were relieved when they saw that the people on the ruined ship did not do anything other than watch. However, they did not expect that just as they were about to kill Francis, the people on the ruined ship moved and a young man jumped down. "Sir, we are from the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom. He is someone that the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom wants to kill." The cold-faced middle-aged man sized up Gray and said with some fear. A family that could afford a ruined ship was definitely a top family. Such a family was not simple. Even the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom would not be willing to provoke them. West Hermit Kingdom, a kingdom force. You are from the Eternal Dominion? Gray's expression turned cold as he looked at the three. There were two large territories near the Forbidden Forest. One of them was called the Chaos Territory, which was overseen by the Chaos Temple. The forces there were in the form of family clans. The other territory was called the Eternal Dominion, which was overseen by the Eternal Holy Empire, which was not weaker than the Chaos Temple. The forces there were in the form of a kingdom. Since the other party claimed to be from the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom, they naturally came from the Eternal Dominion. Yes, sir. He is someone that the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom wants to kill. Please don't get involved in this matter for the sake of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom. The cold-faced middle-aged man lowered his posture, but there was a hint of threat in his words. Clearly, he wanted the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom to intimidate Gray. The royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom? Gray's expression turned cold in the next moment. What great respect! A force from the Eternal Dominion wants a force from the Chaos Territory to give them face. I'm afraid the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom doesn't have that much respect. You are courting death. The three middle-aged men were instantly infuriated. The short man was unable to stop himself from wanting to attack Gray. However, the sinister-looking man stopped him, his eyes gesturing towards the sky. Ever since the young man in front of them jumped down from the ruined ship floating in the sky, the expressions of everyone on the ship who had been waiting to watch a good show disappeared. Many people stared coldly at the three of them. Cough, cough. Francis coughed and tried to stand up with the support of his spear. Gray hurried over to support him and handed him a bottle of advanced healing potion. After drinking the advanced healing potion, Francis's complexion improved a little. I didn't expect to meet you here. I didn't expect to meet you here. What's going on? Why is he being pursued by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family? It's a long story. Francis smiled bitterly and shook his head. There was a trace of loneliness in his eyes. You know each other? Hearing the conversation between Gray and Francis, the three of them were shocked. Then, they pulled away without hesitation. They originally thought that there was still room for mediation. After all, the other party just happened to meet them. If they paid a price, the other party might hand over Francis. However, they didn't expect that the other party actually knew each other. Moreover, it seemed that their relationship wasn't shallow. They immediately felt that something was wrong and turned to flee. Chi. The three of them didn't run far before three black fogs swiftly wrapped around their bodies. Then, they felt a sharp pain. The three of them were shocked to find that their bodies were actually melting. The intense pain caused the three of them to scream. They used their abilities to struggle violently, but they couldn't break free. Although the black fog shrouding them was like a shadow substance, it had extraordinary tenacity. No matter how they struggled, it was useless. You can't kill us. We're from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. If you kill us, you'll become an enemy of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. The short man screamed in horror and despair. Unfortunately, Gray had no intention of changing his mind. In the end, under the black fog, the flesh of the three of them disappeared. Even their bones were melted. The three of them didn't know that it was precisely because they were from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family that Gray wanted to kill them. Although he wasn't afraid of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, he wanted to avoid trouble as much as possible. If he could kill the three of them and cut off the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family's trail of Francis, that would naturally be the best. After being saved by you, you've actually become so much stronger. I originally thought that I could get closer to you, but now it seems that the distance between us is getting farther and farther. Seeing that Gray killed the three of them so easily and even completely erased all traces of their existence, Francis exclaimed in surprise. Your strength has also improved a lot. You've actually reached the 4th stage of the King stage. It seems that you've gained a lot after coming to the Source World. Gray smiled and joked. Whether it was Francis or the 3 people he killed, they all had the strength of the 4th stage of the King stage. In less than 2 years, they had reached the 4th stage of the King stage. Although their improvement wasn't as great as his, it was still extremely great. Let's go. Let's get out of here first. After bringing Francis onto the rune ship, Gray ordered the rune ship to set off quickly and leave the place where they had just fought. They are? Seeing that the people on the rune ship were in awe of Gray, Francis was full of surprise. As far as he knew, a family that could afford a rune ship must be a top family. Originally, he was already very curious about how Gray could be related to a top family. Now that he saw that the people of the top family were in awe of Gray, he couldn't help but be even more surprised. A family that was looking for trouble with me. However, I subdued them after beating them up. Gray explained briefly. As for you, it seems that a lot of things have happened in the past 2 years. After talking for a while, Gray learned about Francis's experience in the past 2 years. Like Gray, he had also been teleported into the Forbidden Forest. His strength was only at the 1st stage of the King stage, and he wasn't good at jungle technique. Naturally, it was very difficult for him to survive in the Forbidden Forest. He had encountered danger several times. Once, he encountered a magic light-level blood beast. He couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. Fortunately, he was saved in the end. The person who saved him became his teacher. His teacher was a consecrator of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He was an annihilation class elite who didn't have much time left in his life. He entered the Forbidden Forest to look for opportunities and accidentally met him. With the help of the old man, he obtained the magic light level blood meridian and the subsequent blood skills. Because of this, his strength was able to quickly increase and reach the 4th stage of the King stage. Unfortunately, the old man didn't have much time left. He had passed away a few months ago. During his time in the West Hermit Kingdom, because of the old man, he met the 3rd princess, Dana Sai. They started to have feelings for each other and started dating. With the old man there and the identity of an Annihilation class elite's disciple, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family didn't have much to say about it. After the old man died, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family's attitude changed. They tried to stop the 2 of them from dating. The 2 of them decided to elope, but they were discovered by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, who had been secretly monitoring them. Dana Sai was captured, and he was hunted down by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. After running for a month, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family found him. They chased him all the way here. Gray, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family won't just let this go. When I recover, you should let me off the ship. Otherwise, I will drag you down. Although he was shocked by Gray's power and the fact that he could make a top family obey him, he knew how scary the West Hermit Kingdom was. Among the many kingdoms in Eternal Dominion, it was one of the top kingdoms. It was extremely powerful. He didn't think Gray's power and influence could fight against a kingdom like that. Don't worry. I can deal with the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. You can stay here. Gray shook his head. Not to mention his relationship with Sophia, even if it was his relationship with Francis, it was impossible for him to look on helplessly as the other continued to be hunted down like this. But Francis wanted to say something, but Gray waved his hand to stop him. You don't have to say anything. You are badly injured. Rest well. Boom. Suddenly, the rune ship stopped moving. It went from moving to still in a very short amount of time. Some of the furnishings in the rune ship's room fell to the ground when it suddenly stopped. What happened? Gray frowned and asked the young man, Joshua, who was walking over. Mr. Gray, the rune ship has been stopped. The young man, Joshua, quickly answered. Not good. It must be the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. Francis's face immediately changed when he heard the words of the young man, Joshua. To be able to stop a runic ship that was flying at such a high speed, that person had to be extremely strong. After all, if a runic ship were to travel at full speed, its speed would be several times faster than Demonshine's. Without a formidable strength, it was impossible to stop a runic ship. You rest first. I'll go out and take a look. Gray's face was cold. Without any explanation, he told Francis to stay in the room and walked to the deck. Behind him, the young man, Joshua, hurriedly followed. Gray came to the deck and found that there were 5 other people besides the Urgus family. They should be the ones who forced the rune ship to stop. Who are you? Gray glanced at the 5 of them and asked with a cold look in his eyes. We are very sorry to disturb you. We are members of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. We are tracking a criminal on your family's rune ship. We hope your family can hand him over to us. Among the 5 people, an old man sensed that Francis was on the rune ship through some unknown method and spoke with certainty. Chapter 7:19. The person you are looking for is not here. Gray's eyebrows slightly wrinkled as he said coldly. He had killed the 3 people just now in order to avoid future troubles, but he didn't expect that not only would he fail to avoid them, but they would also arrive so quickly. Mister, one of us is good at tracking scent. I am sure he is on your rune ship. Please hand him over. The old man frowned as he spoke. If I say there is no one, then there is no one. You can leave now. Gray's face turned cold as he ordered them to leave. Young man, are you sure you want to represent your family and become enemies with the West Hermit Kingdom royal family? The old man's face turned gloomy, and his voice was threatening. I don't think you have the power to represent your family and become enemies with the West Hermit Kingdom royal family. I advise you to hand him over. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences. Are you threatening me? Gray's face turned cold. If you want to think of it that way, you can think of it that way, the old man said with a gloomy face. The old man said with a gloomy expression. However, in the next instant, his complexion turned deathly pale. Not only him, but the 4 people who came with him also turned deathly pale. Shock appeared in their eyes. Dozens of presences locked onto them. Each of the presences was at least magic light level. 6 of the presences gave them an extreme sense of danger. They could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Those were the presences of Annihilation Elite. Seeing that the person in charge was a young man like Gray, they thought it was a direct descendant of a top family going out. There were no elites on the ship, and their power was enough to deal with it. So, they did not think it was a big deal. After failing to persuade him, they began to threaten him. What they did not expect was that there were so many elites on the ruined ship. There were dozens of magic light level elites, and there were even 6 annihilation elite. It was not a direct descendant of a top family going out. It was all the elites of a top family going out. Rashly boarding the ruined ship was a huge mistake. It was like poking a hornet's nest. The West Hermit Kingdom royal family? Gray's cold eyes scanned the 5 people. They finally landed on the old man. I am sure I can represent my family. But are you sure you want to represent the West Hermit Kingdom royal family and become enemies with my family? This? Cold sweat slid down his forehead as the old man solemnly swept his gaze over the unfriendly gazes around him. Although his status in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family wasn't low, he still couldn't make the decision to make such an important decision that could affect his family's foundation. Although he had a high status in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, he still couldn't make the decision. With a cold look in his eyes, Gray said with a serious face, "The person you're pursuing is my friend. I request the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family to immediately stop pursuing my friend. Otherwise, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family should be prepared to become enemies with my clan." A hesitant expression appeared on the old man's face. He could naturally hear the seriousness in Gray's words. He understood that if he didn't stop the pursuit, he might really become an enemy of a top family that wasn't any weaker than the West Ho Kingdom's royal family. After considering for a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "If you can guarantee that he will never step into the West Hermit Kingdom again and never meet Her Highness Dinah again, I can cancel the pursuit on behalf of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family." "You have no right to negotiate with me," Gray said with a cold face. "If you can't agree to this, I'm afraid the royal family won't agree," the old man said with a difficult expression. "Then it's up to the royal family to decide. All right, you can leave." Gray waved his hand to drive the 5 people off the runic ship. As a friend, he couldn't make the decision on behalf of Francis. The decision was up to Francis himself. 2 days later, Gray's group arrived at the Urgash family. After a series of tricks, Gray took complete control of the Urgash family. Then, under the guidance of the young man, Gray arrived at the Urgash family's secret room through a passage with many mechanisms. The secret room was filled with all kinds of precious items. There were many precious herbs, many magic weapons, many magic potions, many precious metals. As a clan that could be ranked in the upper echelons of the top clans, the Urgas clan's collection was enormous, to the point that Gray was somewhat overwhelmed. Many of them were very difficult to buy with money. It completely confirmed the saying that things that could be bought with money weren't precious. Precious things couldn't be bought with money. Gray didn't have much need for magic weapons and precious metals. He had already snatched a weapon from Joshua. It was an inheritance-level weapon and was more powerful than all the magic weapons here. Even if he asked a master refiner to refine it with precious metals, it might not be able to surpass the one in his hand. Therefore, he didn't take any of these 2 items. But magic potions, especially precious herbs, were what he needed. The growth of every master refiner was at the cost of a large amount of precious herbs. In the future, when he reached a higher level as a master refiner, he would inevitably need a large amount of precious herbs to practice. Therefore, he stuffed a large amount of precious herbs into his spatial item and swept it clean. Entering another room, the room was filled with crystal vessels of different sizes. Many of the crystal vessels had red liquid in them. A small portion of the crystal vessels didn't have red liquid. It was the place where the Urgash family stored the blood of the blood fiends. Wind Demon Fox, Demon Claw Beast, Blizzard Bear. Gray scanned the room and discovered that the blood fiends' blood here were at least magic light level. There were also quite a few disaster-grade blood fiends' blood. There were even some extremely precious blood fiends' blood. Golden Horn Calamity Beast. When he saw a crystal bottle labeled Golden Horn Calamity Beast, Gray's gaze couldn't help but pause. The Golden Horn Calamity Beast was a disaster-grade blood fiend with metal, earth, fire, and lightning elemental abilities. It was an extremely rare type of disaster-grade blood fiend. If he had obtained a portion of this blood fiend's blood back then, he would have saved a chance to evolve. However, such precious blood fiends' blood were usually sealed in the secret chambers of the top families or even the Holy Cathedral. They wouldn't be sold to the outside world at all. Therefore, even though he had searched through the 3 largest blood fiend shops in Chaos City, he hadn't been able to find a disaster-grade blood fiend with 3 abilities, let alone a disaster-grade blood fiend with 4 abilities. Unfortunately, this blood fiend's blood was useless to him now. Gray shifted his gaze away from the Golden Horn Calamity Beast's blood and continued to look at the other blood fiend's blood. Soon, he paused again. Bird of Calamity. The Bird of Calamity was also a type of blood fiend with 4 abilities. It had earth, wind, lightning, and fire elemental abilities. It could bring disaster to earth, wind, lightning, and fire elemental bodies respectively, so it was called the Bird of Calamity. After that, Gray continued to look at the other blood fiend's blood. He saw 3 blood fiends' blood with 4 abilities, and 9 blood fiends' blood with 3 abilities. Other than that, Gray also saw some blood fiends' blood with rare abilities. For example, the White Bone Calamity Elephant with the ability to ossify. This type of blood fiend could control its bones at will. It could control its bones to fight. Not only did it have super strong defense, but it also had very strong combat abilities. Another example was the Spirit Disaster Beast with spiritual power. This was a type of blood fiend with spiritual power. This type of blood fiend would nurture a combat spirit in its body from the moment it was born. The combat spirit wasn't afraid of sunlight and could materialize. It had extremely strong offensive abilities. The Urgas family was indeed a family with a deep heritage among the top families. Their blood collection was much richer than the Leopold family's. Compared to the Urgas family's collection, the Leopold family's collection was like the difference between a poor family and a noble family. However, considering that the Leopold family had only been a top family for 200 years, it wasn't hard to understand. After taking a set of blood from all the blood fiends with special abilities, Gray left the room. He still hadn't decided whether to consume the blood from these blood fiends with special abilities. However, it wouldn't be wrong to take a set as a backup. He came to another room. After entering this room, Gray couldn't help but feel slightly strange. In the previous rooms, the items in each room belonged to the same category. For example, the rooms where precious herbs were stored, the rooms where precious metals were stored, the rooms where magic potions were stored. Every item in the room belonged to the same category. However, the items in this room were very mixed. Gray saw metals that looked like meteorites, unknown stones that sparkled with the radiance of gems, and things that looked like blood fiends' teeth. In short, the items were very mixed and there was no pattern to speak of. What's with this room? Gray tilted his head and asked Joshua. The items in this room are things that the family has accumulated over the years. I can't determine their specific types and values. Joshua replied. Things that I can't determine their values? Gray's interest was piqued. He couldn't help but look at the items in the room one by one to see if he could identify a few. 1, 2, 3. Soon, Gray realized that he couldn't identify the items that even a family with such a deep heritage like the Urgas family couldn't identify. Although he had super memory and read a lot of books during this period of time, these books were relatively common, and the items recorded were also relatively common. The items in front of him right now were not recorded in the books at all. Could this be blood? Just as he was about to give up, he saw a very transparent gem that was about the size of an adult's foot. Inside it, Gray actually saw a bright red object that looked like blood. Yes, it contains the blood of some kind of blood fiend. Judging from the aura it emits, it shouldn't be of a low level. However, we don't know what kind of blood fiend's blood it is. That's why the family kept it here after obtaining it. Joshua explained. Chapter 720. I don't know what kind of blood fiend's blood. Gray picked up the gemstone and looked at it carefully. Inside the amber gemstone, a lump of blood the size of a baby's fist could be seen clearly. The color was bright red and glistening. There was a faint aura coming out of it. Although it was faint, it was very majestic. It was obviously the blood of a high-level blood fiend. Without hesitation, Gray put the gemstone into his space item. He was going to break the gemstone and take out the blood later. He was very interested in anything related to blood. If he kept it in his hands, maybe someone would be able to identify the type of blood fiend's blood in the future. Based on his judgment, this blood fiend's blood was not simple. The outer layer had already crystallized into a gemstone. This blood fiend's blood must have existed for a very long time. Like amber, it could only be formed after a very long time. But even after such a long time, the blood fiend's blood was still bright and glistening. There was no sign of decay. This showed that this blood fiend's blood was not simple. After leaving the room and searching all the secret rooms of the Urgash family, Gray left the secret room of the Urgash family with satisfaction. Not only did he get a lot of precious herbs, but he also got a lot of rare blood fiend's blood. It was a great harvest. He could not help but think about whether he should visit the secret rooms of the Tully family, the Downey family, and the Vika family. After going to see Francis, Gray returned to the place the Urgash family had arranged for him. He took out the gemstone and placed it on the flat table. On Gray's right index finger, there was a small but very sharp green wind blade attached to it. The green wind blade gently scratched the upper part of the gemstone. The upper part of the gemstone was immediately cut open. The cut was just enough to cut open the top of the lump of blood. Gray reached out and opened the upper part of the gemstone. At that moment, crash! A terrifying aura suddenly appeared. No, it should not be said that it suddenly appeared. It should be said that the aura that already existed suddenly expanded by hundreds or thousands of times. The strong aura made Gray feel slightly suffocated. He could not help but take a step back. What a powerful aura! It's definitely not the aura of an ordinary annihilation-grade blood fiend. Gray's eyes looked shocked. With his power, he could easily face the presence of an annihilation-class elite. Under that presence, he felt suffocated. He could not help but take a step back. One could only imagine how strong that presence was. The blood of a blood fiend that's close to the rule rank, or is it the blood of a rule rank blood fiend? Gray guessed in shock. His judgment was not wrong. The blood sealed in the gem was indeed not simple. It could be close to the blood of a rule-level blood fiend, or even the blood of a rule-level blood fiend. No matter which possibility it was, it meant that it was not simple. Entering the secret chamber of the Urgas family this time, the biggest gain might be this unknown blood fiend's blood. Fortunately, the gemstones outside have concealed most of its aura. Otherwise, it might not have fallen into my hand. The gemstones had greatly weakened the presence of the blood. When the Urgas family first obtained the gemstones, they thought it was just the blood of an ordinary annihilation-class blood fiend. Plus, they did not know what kind of blood fiend's blood it was. So, they were not very interested. They threw it away in the secret chamber. If the blood had revealed such a strong presence before, no matter how stupid they were, the people who first obtained the gemstones would have been able to guess how precious the blood was. They would not have fallen into Gray's hands. He took out a crystal container that was used to hold blood. Gray carefully put the blood into the crystal container. With my body's current condition, I should be able to consume the blood to evolve again. Should I consume this unknown blood fiend's blood? The blood in the crystal container was very bright. It had a strong presence. Gray had a desire to consume the blood to evolve. Under normal circumstances, consuming the blood of an unknown blood fiend was not a good idea. The strong presence showed that the level of the blood was very high. If he consumed it, he might gain a lot of benefit. Dong, dong, dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Through the mind connection, Gray could tell that it was Joshua. The arrival of the other person brought Gray back to reality. He sealed the blood and put it into a space item. Gray opened the door and asked, "What is it?" "Master Gray, we have found the location of the disaster-class Blood Fiend's blood with the puppet ability that you asked us to find." Joshua bowed to Gray and said, "We have found the location. We've got his whereabouts. Where is he?" Gray's face was filled with joy. He could not help but ask excitedly. If he could obtain the blood of a blood fiend with the puppet ability and merge it with his resurrection ability, then he might be able to communicate with the resurrected person from a long distance. With this long-distance communication ability, he would be able to link up all the forces he currently possessed. They would be able to help each other in both offense and defense. He might even be able to contact the plane and understand the situation of the Fergus family and the plane over the past 2 years. It's at the Gusman family. According to the information we obtained, the Gusman family once hunted a disaster-class blood fiend puppet, the Fox of Calamity, over 100 years ago. There should be some remaining blood of the Fox of Calamity puppet. Joshua replied, "The Gusman family?" The information he knew about the Gusman family flashed through Gray's mind. The Gusman family was a top-notch family adjacent to the Urgas family. They were ranked in the upper echelons of the top-notch families and were not weaker than the Urgas family. It was worth mentioning that the Gusman family had a very good reputation among the top-notch families. They had a good relationship with many other top-notch families. Send someone to purchase it immediately. Buy one at all cost. Gray immediately ordered. To his surprise, he did not get the answer he wanted. Joshua frowned and said, "That's right." Joshua frowned and said, "Lord Gray, it would be best if you could personally make a trip to the Gusman family." "Personally make a trip? Why?" Gray looked at Joshua in confusion. Because of some matters, the Urgas family and the Gusman family have always been at odds with each other. If the Urgas family were to send someone over, it might backfire. At odds with each other? Gray's expression turned strange, but he was surprisingly able to understand. With the Urgas family's character of wanting to snatch anything good they saw, it was not surprising that they would become enemies with the Gusman family. It was very likely that they had taken a fancy to something of the Gusman family and tried to snatch it, ultimately becoming enemies with the Gusman family. All right, the Urgas family should not get involved in this matter. Gray waved his hand and dismissed the other party. He decided to personally make a trip. He was determined to obtain the blood of the Fox of Calamity puppet. It would be too late for regrets if he ruined things because of the Urgas family. He once again took out the blood of the unknown blood fiend and hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he put it away. Since he already had clues about the puppet ability, he naturally had to use the remaining transformation opportunity on the puppet ability. As for the blood of the unknown blood fiend, he could only wait for the next time. After letting Francis recuperate in the Urgas family, Gray set off for the Gusman family. A few hours later, he arrived at the Gusman family's city adjacent to the Urgas family. Most of the families in the Origin world had the habit of naming their cities after their family, and the Gusman family was no exception. Thus, this city was called the Gusman City. This was a rather bustling city. The streets were extremely smooth with a cement-like material, and there was an endless flow of carriages and crowds. There were all kinds of shops on both sides of the streets, and the sound of bargaining could be heard from time to time. After arriving at the Gusman family's castle at the center and revealing his identity, Gray was welcomed into a living room. Not long after, a young man arrived. The young man was tall and had a square face. Although he was not considered handsome, he had a masculine feel to him. An aristocratic temperament spontaneously emerged from his body, giving off an external impression that he was rather trustworthy. Gray found this young man somewhat familiar. He had seen him in the Gusman family's team when they were encircling and suppressing the Void Beast. As expected, it's Sir Gray. Seeing Gray, the young man revealed a smile and appeared to be very enthusiastic. Gray had an impression of the young man, and the young man naturally had an impression of Gray as well. In fact, with Gray's performance in the process of killing the void beasts, it was difficult not to have an impression of him. Sir Jonathan, the main reason for my visit to the Gusman family is to purchase something from the Gusman family. After exchanging pleasantries, Gray learned of the other party's name, Jonathan Gusman. May I know what Sir Gray wishes to purchase? Jonathan Gusman was not surprised by Gray's request. After all, the Leopold family had almost no contact with the Gusman family. There had to be a reason for the sudden visit. I heard that the Gusman family had once hunted a fox of Calamity Puppet. I wonder if there's any leftover blood of the fox of Calamity Puppet. If there is, I'd like to purchase a portion of the fox of Calamity Puppet's blood. Fox of Calamity Puppet's blood? Jonathan Gusman recalled for a moment and then looked at Gray. The Gusman family does have some fox of Calamity Puppet's blood, but there's not much left. However, since Sir Gray wishes to purchase it, there's naturally no problem. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Excuse me. Jonathan Gusman nodded slightly to Gray before opening the door and walking out. A moment later, he returned. There was a faint trace of joy on his face, probably because he had heard some good news. Jonathan Gusman smiled apologetically to Gray for his loss of composure and said, "I apologize for my loss of composure. Sir Gray, I can use my share of resources to obtain a portion of the fox of Calamity Puppet's blood for you. I don't even need to pay, but I hope that Sir Gray can do me a favor." Chapter 721. What kind of help? Gray asked after some thought. He did not immediately agree. It would be foolish to agree without knowing what the other party needed help with. Although doing a favor seemed to save him a lot of money, it was not necessarily more worth it than spending a sum of money to buy it. To tell you the truth, my sister found a frost moon flower in the Forbidden Forest, but it is guarded by a powerful magic light rank blood fiend. It will be difficult for the two of us to kill that magic light rank blood fiend, so we would like to ask for your help. Jonathan Gusman said in a very sincere tone. Frost moon flower? You are really lucky to have found such a precious magic herb. Gray was slightly surprised. As a pharmacist, he naturally knew what the frost moon flower was. The frost moon flower was a precious magic herb, and its value was not lower than the blood moon grass he had obtained before. It could also be used as a main ingredient to aid in cultivation. I have a question. With the Gusman family's strength, you should not lack suitable experts. Why are you asking for my help? There are indeed many suitable experts in the family, but if you ask them to help, they will have to share a portion of the frost moon flower as the price. It just so happens that you need the blood of the puppet fox of Calamity, so I would like to use the blood of the puppet fox of Calamity as the price to ask for your help. Jonathan Guzman explained frankly. Deal. After hearing the other party's words, Gray did not hesitate and immediately agreed. As for the powerful magic light rank blood fiend that the other party mentioned, he did not even ask about it. With his current strength, a magic light rank blood fiend was naturally nothing in his eyes. What he needed to consider was to cooperate with the other party to kill this magic light rank blood fiend without exposing his strength as much as possible. Sir Gray, it's great that you are willing to help. After receiving an affirmative answer from Gray, Jonathan Gusman smiled. You are welcome. Besides, I am not helping for free. There will be a reward. Gray nodded in response. The first time they had met, the other party had given him a good impression. As expected of a disciple of the Gusman clan who had a good reputation. Indeed, he had the style of the Gusman clan. Since time was of the essence, and he was worried that the frost moon flower would be swallowed by the magic light level blood fiend, Jonathan Gusman made some preparations before setting off with Gray. A young woman set off with them. She was Jonathan Guzman's sister, Rebecca Guzman. She was wearing a red battle suit and looked quite pretty. Her hair was combed into a large braid, and the braids swayed slightly as she walked. "Brother, is it really okay to ask him for help? I estimate that the battle strength of that blood fiend is already at the 5th level of magic light." On the way, Rebecca Guzman moved closer to Jonathan Gusman and asked softly. She was obviously worried about Gray's strength. She had heard a little about Gray. She heard that he had obtained the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials in the top clans competition not long ago. However, she did not take it to heart because she had also obtained the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials. It was just that it was 5 years ago. In fact, in this competition for the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials, the two upper clans, the Gusman clan and the Urgas clan, did not send out their most outstanding disciples. This allowed the disciples of the middle clans, like Miguel Villa, to have a chance. The reason was that the outstanding disciples of the two clans had already entered the Tower of Trials before, and each person could only enter the Tower of Trials once. Don't underestimate him. His battle strength is not necessarily weaker than mine. He might even be stronger than me, Jonathan Gusman said with a solemn expression. Not weaker than you, and might even be stronger than you? Brother, are you sure? Rebecca Gusman's expression turned to one of surprise. She was very clear about her brother's strength. He was at the 4th level of magic light, and he possessed water and metal elemental abilities. His battle strength was comparable to the 5th level of magic light. However, her brother, who was so powerful, actually said that the other party was comparable to him or might even surpass him. Did this not mean that the other party's battle strength was at least at the 5th level of magic light? Of course, I'm not joking, Jonathan Gusman said with a solemn expression. He also participated in the battle to encircle and annihilate the Void Beast. At that time, he teamed up with Blanca Mandy, Landrin Gomo, and George Lopez. The battle strength he displayed was not inferior to the three of them. Blanca Mandy, Landrin Gomo, and George Lopez were willing to team up with him? His battle strength was not inferior to the three of them? Rebecca Guzman was completely shocked. There was no doubt about the strength of the three most powerful families. Even if several top families were to join forces, they might not necessarily be a match for one of the most powerful families. Their powerful strength made the children of the three most powerful families extremely arrogant and haughty. Other than each other, they would never get involved with the children of other families. She did not expect that the three of them would make an exception and team up with the other party. What surprised her even more was that the other party's battle strength was not inferior to the three of them. She finally understood why her brother had invited him. On one hand, he was unwilling to share the frost moonflower with others. On the other hand, he probably had the intention of befriending the other party. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The three of them were all at the magic light level, so their speed was naturally extremely fast. Even though they were traveling on foot, they entered the forbidden forest after a few hours. They went deeper in, and after more than an hour, they arrived at the place where they found the frost moon flower. It was a lake next to a mountain, surrounded by dense trees. Although it was summer, there was a thick layer of ice on the surface of the lake. Cold air seeped out like smoke, making the entire lake look like it was shrouded in smoke. In the midst of the smoke, a palm-sized white flower that looked like it was carved out of ice bloomed leisurely. It did not emit a delicate fragrance, only wisps of cold air. It was precisely because of the cold air it emitted that a layer of ice had formed on the surface of the lake. Be careful, that blood fiend is at the bottom of the lake, Rebecca Guzman said with some lingering fear. Last time, she had almost died under the sneak attack of the blood fiend at the bottom of the lake. If she had not used her blood skill at the crucial moment, she might not have been able to escape. Gray looked at the surface of the lake and was surprised to find that they were not the only visitors. Apart from them, there was another blood fiend. This was a 7-meter-long blood fiend covered in black scales. It was a desolate level blood fiend, the Shadow Dragon. It was a desolate level blood fiend with the bloodline of a dragon. At this point, Gray naturally understood that the so-called dragon was only a rule-level blood fiend. Even a rule-level powerhouse could not be sure if a true divine beast really existed. Pa pa pa. The shadow dragon discovered the frost moon flower in the middle of the lake. It stepped on the ice and very carefully approached the frost moon flower. Suddenly, the ice under its feet cracked. From under the ice, a huge white mouth that looked like it was made of ice sprang out and bit its body. Crack! The huge mouth closed, and the crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. The shadow dragon struggled violently in pain, but it could not break free at all. It was dragged into the water. The surface of the lake was dyed red with blood, causing a disturbance. In the end, the disturbance subsided. The shadow dragon should be completely dead and turned into food for that giant beast. It's a demonic frost crocodile, but it's much bigger than the one described in the book. It seems that it has consumed many herbs that can promote evolution. Whether it was the blood moon grass or the frost moonflower, they both had the characteristics of increasing one's strength and promoting bloodline evolution. The demonic frost crocodile should have consumed similar magic herbs before, which was why it could grow to such a large size. I'll lure it out. Your Excellency Gray will take the opportunity to blast it out of the lake. After a simple discussion, Jonathan Gussman and Gray took action. Jonathan Gussman walked on the lake and approached the frost moonflower. Gray followed behind him with a distance. Tap, tap, tap. His leather boots stepped on the ice, producing rhythmic tapping sounds. Jonathan Gussman approached the frost moonflower at a moderate speed. If one looked closely, one would notice that his body was slightly bent, and his gaze was looking at his feet. Clearly, he was wary of the demonic frost crocodile in the lake. Crack! Suddenly, a blurry shadow appeared under the ice. Then, the ice under Jonathan Gussman's feet shattered, and a huge mouth that looked like it was carved out of ice bit at Jonathan Gussman. Bang! At this moment, Jonathan Gussman stepped on the void, and his body rose in a straight line, escaping to higher ground. The demonic frost crocodile slapped the water with its tail and leaped high, biting at Jonathan Gussman. Bang! Before it could bite Jonathan Gussman, a large amount of black fog slapped its body like a huge hand. The ice-like scales on its body were instantly corroded, and blood stains appeared. The huge body that was more than 30 meters tall was sent flying far away. It was thrown out of the lake, plowing a long trail on the ground. Big Brother is right. Gray Leopold's combat power is not weaker than his. Sensing that the power of Gray's attack had definitely reached the 5th level of magic light, Rebecca Gussman narrowed her eyes with a hint of surprise. Although she did not doubt her brother's words, she could not help but be slightly surprised when she saw the combat power of the 5th level of magic light. The other party should be younger than her by a few years, but he had already surpassed her and had the combat power of the 5th level of magic light. It was hard to imagine that such a person came from a family like Leopold. Woo! The demonic frost crocodile that was sent flying got up and glared at Gray furiously. It opened its huge mouth and roared. Then, ice balls with a diameter of a meter flew toward Gray like cannonballs. Chee-chee! In front of Gray, the black fog turned into a wall. The ice balls hit the black fog wall and were instantly melted by the black fog. In the end, all the ice balls were blocked by the black fog. Chapter 722. Woo! The attack failed to hurt Gray. The demonic frost crocodile opened its mouth and tried to attack Gray again. However, before it could attack Gray again, a huge black water ball crashed into it. Bang! The black water ball was only a few meters in diameter, but it had terrifying power. Under the attack of the black water ball, the demonic frost crocodile was sent flying again with its skin torn and flesh lacerated. A mountain peak collapsed from the impact. Jonathan Gussman regained his strength and made his move. The black water ball was a dual elemental ability that was formed by a mixture of water and metal elemental abilities. The water produced by this ability had a greater weight than metal, and its power was greater than a solid metal ball that was flying at high speed. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying booms continued to sound. The mountains in the surrounding area disappeared under the battle between the two sides. The ground was flattened and full of potholes. Unsurprisingly, under the combined attack of Gray and Jonathan Gussman, who were both at the 5th level of magic light, the ridiculously large demonic frost crocodile was killed. The plucking of the frost moon flower was done by Rebecca Gussman. Gray was somewhat interested in the frost moon flower, but his interest was not as great as his interest in the puppet fox of Calamity. He had obtained a large number of mana herbs from the Yugas family's treasury, and among them, there were herbs whose value was comparable to the frost moon flower. The three of them stayed the night in the forest and returned to the Gussman family the next day. Gray quickly obtained the blood of the fox of Calamity puppet. After declining their requests to stay, Gray left the Gussman family and teleported back to the Urgash family. Looks like your injuries are almost healed. After returning to the Urgash family, Gray saw Francis. He had taken a high-level healing potion, and it had been a few days since his last injury. His injuries were almost healed. Yes, I'll be able to fully recover in a few days at most. Francis forced a smile, but he could not hide the loneliness in the depths of his eyes. To be able to elope, their feelings for each other were obviously very deep. Now that they were separated, it was normal for them to feel lonely. Thinking of Dinah Sai? Gray sighed and asked. Yes. When he heard Gray mention this name, the forced smile on Francis's face suddenly collapsed, and sadness appeared on his face. There's no need to be too sad. It's not like there's no turning point between you and Dana Sai. After a slight hesitation, Gray said, Really? Upon hearing Gray's words, Francis raised his head abruptly and looked at Gray with suspicion and anticipation. Yes. Gray nodded solemnly and said, The reason why the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family stopped you from being together with Dana Sai is because they feel that your status is unworthy. So long as you join the Yugas clan, obtain the identity of a direct descendant of the Yugas clan, and then propose as a descendant of the Yugas clan, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family naturally has no reason to refuse. Join the Yugas family and become a direct descendant of the Yugas family? Francis frowned. This kind of joining is only in name. You only need to declare that you are a disciple of the Urgash family. I think you also understand my relationship with the Urgash family. Don't worry, this kind of joining will not bind you in any way. Gray explained. Will it work? Francis had some doubts. As far as he knew, the West Hermit Kingdom was one of the top kingdoms in the Eternal Territory. He did not think that the identity of a disciple of the Yugas family would be useful. Seeing through the other party's thoughts, Gray chuckled. You might not understand the power of the Yugas family. The Yugas family has 6 Annihilation Elite. They are one of the top families in the Chaos Territory. 6 Annihilation Class Elites. Francis was so shocked that he stood up from his seat. He looked at Gray with shock. He did not know how many Annihilation Elites the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family had, but it should be around that number. He did not expect the Yugas family, where he had been staying for a few days, to have that kind of power. Gray, what about your power? He suddenly remembered that the Yugas family had been intimidated by Gray's power. That meant Gray's power was stronger than 6 Annihilation Elites combined. I used some tricks to intimidate the Yugas family, but I still have the power of a second-tier Annihilation class, Gray said with a smile. He trusted Francis, and he didn't mind revealing the rest of the situation, except for some extremely secret information that was inconvenient to disclose. Second-tier Annihilation class power? Francis's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He looked at Gray with shock. He was shocked. He was extremely shocked. To be able to intimidate a top-class family, he guessed that Gray had the power of an Annihilation class. He did not expect Gray's power to be Annihilation class. It was also second-tier Annihilation class. His teacher was only first-tier annihilation class when he died. Han's son was not even 30 years old. He had reached a level his teacher could not reach. Hurry up and recover. The Yuga's family needs to prepare. When you recover, you should be able to leave for the West Hermit Kingdom. After patting Francis on the shoulder, Gray left. Francis was still in a daze. Returning to his place in the Yuga's family, Gray took out the blood of the Fox of Disaster puppet. Inside the transparent crystal bottle, there was a liquid that shone with a blue light. It also had a slightly scary presence. Gulp! He uncorked the bottle and drank it. His mouth was suddenly filled with the sweet taste of blood and some fragrance. The blood of a high-class blood beast would naturally have a medicinal fragrance. To some extent, it was no different from magic potions. The quality was even higher than normal magic potions. It was like needles were pricking Gray's soul. Wave after wave, it was like a tide. Puppet power was a soul power. It could use the mysterious power of the soul to turn other people or creatures into its own puppet. Naturally, in order to obtain such power, one had to transform the soul. Large beads of sweat slid down Gray's forehead. Gray gritted his teeth and endured it. Finally, after what felt like a century to Gray, the transformation ended. After taking a few deep breaths, Gray felt his fatigue weaken slightly. He stood up and could not wait to check the changes he had obtained after swallowing the blood of the Fox of Disaster puppet. Whoosh! His mind sent out a command to contact Kensha. The next moment, a strange feeling appeared. Gray felt as if his consciousness was quickly shuttling through space through his connection with Kensha. Soon, he found that his consciousness had entered the mind of another person. Lord Gray. Just after he entered this person's mind, he immediately heard a surprised female voice. This voice belonged to Kensha. Have Fod and the others returned? Gray responded and asked. They returned yesterday. Lord Gray, I heard that you went to the Yuga's family. Why are you back so soon? Kensha asked curiously. I'm currently in the Yuga's family. The reason why I can contact you is because I obtained a new ability. After a brief explanation, Gray had Kensha cooperate with him to feel the changes after obtaining the puppet ability. After testing it, Gray found that he could immerse himself in Kensha's situation through her 5 senses. Whether it was the fragrant flowers blooming in front of her, the faint fragrance of the flowers, or the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, he could feel it all. Moreover, he could take control of Kensha's body and control her body to fight from a distance. However, the abilities he could use were only Kensha's abilities. He could not use his own abilities of the law of time and the law of space. After canceling his connection with Kensha, Gray contacted the people of the various families scattered all over the anarchic territory. He could also communicate with them and control their bodies. As I speculated, the puppet ability and the resurrection ability are extremely compatible. They have indeed fused together. Gray was excited. Without a doubt, the reason for such a change was that the puppet ability had been fused with the resurrection ability, allowing the resurrection ability to communicate and control from a distance. With this ability, the 5 factions I control are no longer a sheet of loose sand. Very satisfied with the changes brought about by the puppet ability, Gray once again used the long-distance communication ability. However, this time, the target was not a member of a family, but Barnet Naim, who was in the middle of a plain. Barnet Naim, a king-class warrior of the Nahum family. He had been killed by Gray when he was seeking revenge on Gray and had been revived with the resurrection ability. Now, he was permanently stationed at Fergus Castle, protecting the safety of Fergus Castle. Whoosh! Gray's consciousness quickly traversed, getting closer and closer to Barnet Naim. However, just as he was about to reach Barnet Naim, he was stopped by a black barrier, unable to advance any further. Plain barrier. Gray was very familiar with this black barrier. He could tell at a glance that it was a plain barrier. After all, it was not the first time he had come into contact with a plain barrier. I did not expect the plane barrier to have an isolating effect. His consciousness returned to his body. Gray's face was full of regret. He had wanted to use this opportunity to understand the changes in the Fergus family and the plane over the past 2 years. Now, it seemed that it would not work. With the plane barrier blocking him, his consciousness could not enter Barnett Naim's body. A few days later, Francis's body had completely recovered. The Urgas family's rune ship rose into the air and set off for the West Hertz Kingdom. Aside from the basic personnel on the rune ship, there was Francis, the 3 Annihilation-class elites of the Urgas family, including Joshua and Gray. After some consideration, Gray finally decided to go with them. If things did not work out, he would use his space power to take them away. Of course, this was the worst-case scenario. Chapter 723. In the garden of a huge palace, a woman with long green hair was squatting in the flower bed. She sat there quietly and did not move for a long time. The woman was wearing a green palace dress. Her facial features were exquisite and her skin was fair. However, her eyes were slightly lifeless. She looked like an exquisite doll. Tap, tap, tap. Crisp footsteps came from behind her. They came from afar and finally came to her back. However, she was still motionless like a doll. "Don't you want to know about him?" A crisp female voice rang out. Behind her, a young woman in a white court dress spoke. The young woman in the white dress also had long green hair. Her appearance was similar to the squatting young woman in the green dress. They were both extremely exquisite. "Sister, do you have news about him?" The young woman in the green dress finally looked back at the young woman in the white dress behind her. Her eyes were filled with apprehension and fear. Obviously, she was very afraid of hearing the news that she did not want to hear the most. "Yes, the people sent by the family to hunt him down have just returned today." The young woman in the white dress nodded. "Sister, how is he?" The young woman in the green dress suddenly stood up and grabbed the shoulders of the young woman in the white dress. Her body trembled slightly and her eyes were filled with tears. "Don't worry, he's fine." The young woman in the white dress sighed in her heart and said, "Really? Sister, you're not lying to me?" The young woman in the green dress looked at the young woman in the white dress with surprise and fear. She was surprised by this news and afraid that this news was false. "It's true. I promise it's true." The young woman in the white dress reached out and touched the head of the young woman in the green dress. Her voice was filled with certainty. "Then why did the people sent by the royal family to hunt him down withdraw?" The young woman in the green dress asked doubtfully. She was naturally very happy that the people sent by the royal family to hunt him down had been withdrawn. However, she knew very well that their elopement this time made the royal family feel very embarrassed. The royal family would never stop until they killed him. Because they had to give up the chase. The young woman in the white dress said with a smile. "They had to give up the chase? Sister, what's going on?" The young woman in the green dress looked at the young woman in the white dress in surprise. Vicente found him hiding in a rune ship, so he stopped the rune ship and threatened the rune ship's owner to hand him over. In the end, there were 6 Annihilation-class elites and a few dozen demon light warriors on the rune ship. Vicente almost died and made it back. Thinking of Deacon Vicente's lingering fear when he returned from the pursuit, the woman in the white dress revealed a trace of a smile. 6 Annihilation-class elites and dozens of magic light warriors. The young woman in the green dress couldn't help but open her mouth wide in shock. Even the strength of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom was only at this level. Yet, such a runic ship actually possessed such strength. She could imagine how terrified and devastated Deacon Vicente must have been when he went to chase after them. "Which family does that runic ship belong to? Why are you protecting him?" The young woman in the green dress couldn't help but ask as her mood improved. Judging from the emblem, it should be the Yugas family, one of the top families in the Chaos territory. The reason for protecting him should be because he knows this family and has a deep relationship with them. The woman in the white dress smiled. If I knew he had such a deep relationship with the Yugas family, which is one of the top families in the Chaos territory, the family wouldn't have dared to send people to kill him. The West Hermit Kingdom was one of the top kingdoms in the Eternal Territory. In terms of power, they were no weaker than the Yugas family. However, although they were no weaker than the Yugas family, they didn't want to become enemies with such a family. The royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom was a family that cared a lot about benefits. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stopped Francis from dating Dana West Hermit after his teacher had died. Becoming enemies with such a top family for Francis was obviously not in the interest of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom. 10 days later, the Yugas family's runic ship left the Chaos territory and entered the Eternal territory. Ahead is the border of the West Hermit Kingdom. On the deck of the runic ship, Francis looked at a stronghold in the distance with a strange feeling in his heart. More than a month ago, he had escaped from this place into the Forbidden Forest. His future was unknown. More than a month later, he had returned. This time, he had come openly. The huge difference between before and after gave birth to an indescribable feeling in his heart. He looked at Gray with eyes full of gratitude. The reason why he was able to appear here in broad daylight after more than a month was because of Gray. It was because of Gray that he was able to return here. The runic ship slowed down and slowly approached the stronghold. On the deck, Josh and the other 2 Annihilation-class elites had a faint presence. They revealed their identities as Annihilation-class elite. They felt the presence of the 3 of them, which was very faint but very scary. The fortress became very nervous. Although it was an important place near the border, there was only 1 Annihilation-class elite guarding it. If 3 Annihilation-class elites attacked the fortress's power would not be able to withstand them. So, in the stronghold, there was only 1 Annihilation-class elite. He was a middle-aged man with a beard. He approached the runic ship and landed on the deck. The middle-aged man's face looked serious. He was an Annihilation-class elite. He recognized the top family, the Urgash family's family emblem. He had heard about what had happened between the kings and the Urgash family. Now that the Urgash family was there, it made him feel uneasy. He glanced at the 3 Yugas elites with Annihilation-class auras and asked politely, "Why have you come, Yugas family?" "We are here to visit the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty." Josh looked at the middle-aged man and nodded. "Visit the royalty?" The middle-aged man took a deep look at Joshua. He couldn't figure out the purpose of the Urgas family's visit, so he pondered for a moment before speaking. After thinking for a while, he said, "Please rest in the stronghold. I will send someone to inform the royalty." Okay. The runic ship landed in the stronghold. Gray and the others were led to a room in the stronghold. News about them quickly spread to the West Hermit Kingdom's capital. After receiving the news from the stronghold, the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty immediately called for a high-level meeting. "What do you think?" West Hermit Kingdom's King Bowen West Hermit, a man with a strong aura of a leader, asked as he looked at the people in the meeting room. Obviously, they are not friendly. The royalty has just chased Francis, who is related to the Yugas family. Not long after, the Yugas family will come to visit. They are not friendly. An old man with a bald head in the middle said, "This is too much. The royalty has already given up on chasing Francis. What else does the Yugas family want? Do they think the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty is easy to bully?" Another old man said with a cold look in his eyes, "It is best if we can avoid becoming enemies with the Yugas family, especially during these special times." A woman wearing a precious gem necklace whose age could not be determined said with a serious face. On the west border, the Tuya Kingdom, whose power was not as strong as the West Hermit Kingdom, had sent more troops to the border. If there was a conflict with the Yugas family at this time, it could lead to the West Hermit Kingdom fighting on 2 fronts. Facing 2 factions that were not weaker than the West Hermit Kingdom was a very dangerous situation. "I hope it is not the worst-case scenario," a middle-aged man said with a frown. After some discussion, the royalty of the West Hermit Kingdom finally agreed to the Yugas family's visit. While sending people to the fortress to receive the Yugas family, the royal capital also quickly made preparations to welcome them. Although the Yugas family might not be friendly, as a royalty of a kingdom, basic etiquette was still necessary. 2 days later, the runic ship arrived at the royal capital of the West Hermit Kingdom. It slowly landed in the square of the royal capital of the West Hermit Kingdom and entered the royal palace under the warm welcome of the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty. In the huge hall, the West Hermit Kingdom's King Bowen West sat in the main seat. The upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom and Grey and the others sat on the left and right sides of the hall. The atmosphere was heavy. Bowen West Hermit Kingdom's king glanced at Grey and the others. After pausing for a moment on Francis, he asked in a deep voice, "May I know why the Yugas family has come this time?" "Your Majesty, the Yugas family is visiting the West Hermit Kingdom for our family's disciple, Francis, to propose to Dana West Hermit." Joshua glanced at Francis next to him and said solemnly, "Don't worry." Chapter 724. Marriage Alliance? The Yugas family came for a marriage alliance? In an instant, the solemn atmosphere in the hall collapsed. The upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom looked at each other and sighed softly. They couldn't help but be stunned. The war with the Tuya Kingdom could break out at any time. At this tense moment, their nerves couldn't help but tense up and become overly sensitive. They couldn't help but think of war whenever something happened. Therefore, when they learned of the Yugas family's arrival, their first thought was that the Yugas family came with ill intentions and came to demand an explanation for Francis, who was being hunted down. As for a marriage alliance, they really didn't think about it. Bowen Sai couldn't help but sigh softly in his heart. It was fine as long as they didn't come with ill intentions. Fighting on 2 fronts would be too disadvantageous for the West Hermit Kingdom. He looked at Joshua with some doubts and asked, "Your Excellency just said that Francis is a descendant of the Yugas family, but I remember that Francis' surname should be Violet, right?" Violet is Francis' mother's surname. To be honest, Francis ran away from home a few years ago due to some matters, and there hasn't been any news of him since. It was only a while ago that we accidentally discovered him. Joshua said with a sigh. "I see." In the hall, the upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family came to a realization. Because he ran away from home and didn't want the family to find him, he changed his surname to his mother's. This was just a willful action of a runaway child. No matter how he changed his surname, his identity as a descendant of the Yugas family would not change. That explains it. Some of the upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom couldn't help but recall some investigations on Francis. The investigations speculated that he had received an extremely rigorous education in ancient aristocratic etiquette, and such education only existed in ancient families. Since he was a descendant of the Yugas family, then it made sense. As a family that wasn't inferior to the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, the aristocratic education their descendants received was naturally extremely rigorous. "Your Majesty, this time my family came with sincerity. I hope Your Majesty can allow it," Joshua said solemnly as he looked at the King of West Hertz, Bowen Sirts. "Your Excellency Joshua, the royal family can feel the sincerity of the Yugas family. However, the royal family has to carefully consider such a big matter as a marriage alliance." West Hertz's king, Bowen Syh, said with some hesitation. From the perspective of gains and losses, it was indeed a good choice to form a marriage alliance with the Yugas family. They could immediately gain a powerful ally. However, his daughter, Dana Sai, was a rare and precious chess piece. From the looks of it, the market wasn't bad. He had to maximize the benefits. Perhaps there was a marriage partner more suitable than the Yugas family. We naturally understand this, but we still hope to receive an answer as soon as possible. After all, we can't stay in the West Hermit Kingdom for long. Joshua could roughly guess the other party's thoughts, and a trace of disdain appeared in his heart. However, on the surface, he smiled and did not mind. Even the Urgash family couldn't do such a thing. The Urgash family's ruthlessness was mainly targeted at outsiders. They had always been very good to their own family members, but the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family didn't even let their own family members go. He didn't care about the other party waiting for the best offer. The marriage was only the first step. If the marriage didn't work, then he would have to resort to extreme measures. He was very clear about Gray's plan. Of course. West Hermit King Bowen-sai laughed. He thought that the response from the 4 factions should be coming soon. In fact, he stopped Dana Sai and Francis because he wanted to form a marriage alliance with the 4 factions. Your Majesty, urgent military situation. Suddenly, a man in battle armor walked quickly into the hall. After bowing to West Hermit King Bowen-sai, he said in a hurried voice, "Hand it over." West Hermit King Bowen-sai waved his hand. Someone took the letter from the man in battle armor and handed it to West Hermit King Bowen-sai. West Hermit King Bowen-sai opened the letter. The next moment, his expression turned ugly. Suddenly, he had a thought and looked at Joshua. "I'm ashamed. I'm afraid I'll have to break my promise to the Urgas family." "Oh, why is that?" Joshua asked with a surprised expression. The border war between the West Hermit Kingdom and the Tuya Kingdom has already broken out. At this time, the royal family really doesn't have the energy to consider the marriage alliance, so I'm afraid we won't be able to give the Urgas family an answer in a short period of time. West Hermit King Bowen-sai said with a ashamed expression. "In that case, it's indeed not the time to consider the marriage alliance. My Urgas family will take our leave first. We'll come again after the war is over," Joshua said regretfully. With that, Joshua and the other members of the Urgas family stood up and pretended to leave. Francis was very reluctant to leave, but under Gray's signal, he also stood up and prepared to leave. "Everyone from the Urgas family, please wait." West Hermit King Bowen-sai's expression stiffened when he saw the Urgas family preparing to leave. This was completely different from the answer he had expected. He originally thought that the Urgas family would lend a helping hand. After all, although the marriage alliance didn't succeed, they still had the intention. He didn't expect the Urgas family to simply leave. He smiled awkwardly and called out to the people of the Urgas family. "The Tuya Kingdom is closing in step by step. Now that the West Hermit Kingdom is in urgent need of strength, I wonder if the Urgas family can lend a helping hand?" "Lend a helping hand." Joshua shook his head without hesitation. "I'm sorry, the Urgas family doesn't have any conflict with the Tuya Kingdom. I really don't want to provoke such a force. If it's a marriage alliance with the West Hermit Kingdom, it's fine. As for now, I can only apologize." With that, Joshua turned to leave with the people of the Urgas family. "Sir Joshua, please wait a moment." West Hermit King Bowen-sai hesitated. After a moment of hesitation, he called out to the people of the Urgas family again. "Well, now that the West Hermit Kingdom is in danger, if Dana can marry into the Urgas family, she'll be able to get the protection of the Urgas family. Even if the kingdom is destroyed, she'll be able to survive. In addition, she and Francis do have feelings for each other. As a father, I also hope that he can be happy. I've decided to agree to this marriage alliance." West Hermit King Bowen-sai put on a fatherly face, but only he knew what he was really thinking. He could see that the Urgas family was trying to threaten him, but now that there was a war with the Tuya Kingdom was very aggressive. They were in urgent need of strength. Urgas had 3 Annihilation-class elites with him. He had to get them over no matter what. So, he could only agree for now and keep them in check. Although he had agreed, it did not mean he could not go back on his word. If there was a more suitable family than the Urgas family after the war, he could go back on his word. As for the reason, he could have as many as he wanted. Since the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family is related by marriage, the Urgas family cannot sit idly by when the Tuya Kingdom invades the West Hermit Kingdom. The Urgas family is willing to help. Joshua smiled and led the people of the Urgas family to sit down again. This is great. With the help of the Urgas family, the West Hermit Kingdom will win this war. Seeing the marriage between the West Hermit Kingdom and the Urgas family succeed, and the Urgas family was willing to help, the West Hermit Kingdom's higher-ups were very excited. With the power of the West Hermit Kingdom and the 3 Annihilation class elites, they were sure to win this war. Although they had sacrificed a woman, using a woman as the price to win the war was definitely worth it. The West Hermit Kingdom's royal family started to prepare for departure. Gray and the others were arranged to stay in a luxurious courtyard in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal palace. Gray, thank you so much. Francis could no longer hide his excitement. He spoke to Gray with great emotion. You are welcome. Gray shook his head. He had a playful look on his face as he joked. Let's go. Take me to see the woman you have been dreaming about. In the past, Francis would make fun of him and Sophia. Now, he finally had a chance to make fun of him. He could not help but want to make fun of him. Facing Gray's teasing, Francis' face turned red, which was rare. He still led the way. This way. Gray wanted to see Dana sigh, but he wanted to see Dana sigh even more. They had been apart for a month. His heart was filled with longing. Gray's words had completely stimulated his longing. His longing was like a flood that had broken through a dam. Because it was a marriage alliance, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family had no reason to stop them. Gray and Francis went all the way to Dana Sai's residence without any obstructions. Dana. Francis. In the garden of this residence, Gray and Francis saw a beautiful woman wearing a long green dress. She had long green hair, a delicate face, and a slender body. She was a woman as beautiful as an elf. She was the woman Francis had been dreaming about, Dana Sai. Francis could not help but call out her name and walk over. She ran all the way into Francis's arms. The two of them hugged each other passionately. The meeting of lovers, especially lovers who had experienced life and death together, was destined to be full of affection. Looking at the two of them who were full of affection, Gray felt a little awkward. He seemed to be unnecessary. He shrugged and hurriedly left the way he had come, leaving the couple alone. In his mind, the silhouette of a purple-haired woman flashed past, and he wondered where she was now. Chapter 725. A day later, Gray and the others arrived at the western border of the West Hermit Kingdom with the reinforcements of the royal family. Kill! Between the barren mountain ridges that were originally covered in dense forests, the ground was full of crisscrossing scars. Mountain ridges had collapsed under the attacks, and the tragic sounds of fighting rose and fell one after another. Blood dyed the ground red, and a strong smell of blood filled the air. Severed limbs and corpses could be seen everywhere, and the number was increasing from time to time. There were people fighting both on the ground and in the sky. The side fighting on the ground was desolate level or below, while the side fighting in the sky was king level or even magic light. The powerful destructive power forced them to fight in the sky. Otherwise, the people around them, whether enemies or companions, would die under the aftermath of their battle. One side was wearing green battlesuits, while the other side was wearing black battlesuit. It was obvious that the side wearing green battlesuits was losing ground, while the side wearing black battlesuits was gaining momentum. The side wearing green armor was the army of the West Hermit Kingdom. Their fortress had been lost, and now they were retreating while fighting. However, the side of the Tuya Kingdom wearing black armor obviously had no intention of letting them go, and was chasing them relentlessly. Kill! The West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcements quickly joined in, and pounced on the side of the Tuya Kingdom wearing black armor. Gray brushed past a king-level warrior in black battle armor. He didn't use his Blood Fiend ability. Just by relying on his physical strength, he cut the king-level warrior in half along with his weapon and body. Crash! Raging purple flames wrapped around Francis's spear, and he stabbed at a king-level warrior who was surrounded by cold air and had ice ability. Ah! The white cold air disintegrated in an instant. The king-level warrior with ice ability had no time to dodge, and he was wrapped in purple flames, screaming as he fell to the ground. Both Gray and Francis were part of the West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcement. The Yuga's family had a marriage alliance with the West Hermit Kingdom. As the marriage partner, Francis naturally had to express his gratitude, so he joined the West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcements. On the other hand, Gray naturally couldn't watch Francis fight without participating in the battle, so he also joined the West Ho Kingdom's reinforcements. In addition to the two of them, many young people from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family were among the reinforcements. Dana Say, her sister Valita Say, and her brother Hall Say were among them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After killing several king-level warriors in a row, a magic light warrior from the Tuya Kingdom set his eyes on Gray. He clawed at Gray with his fist and claws. Suddenly, several huge green wind blades, tens of meters long, attacked Gray. The people who were fighting along the way, regardless of whether they were from the Western Ho Kingdom or the Tuya Kingdom, were all sent flying by the strong wind generated by the huge wind blade. In front of Gray, the black mist turned into a huge black mist column and smashed towards the magic light warriors of the Tuya Kingdom. All the wind blades were destroyed. The black mist column hit the magic light warriors of the Tuya Kingdom before they could react. Under the terrifying corrosive power of the black mist, the Tuya Kingdom's magic light warrior screamed. The warrior's flesh and blood quickly disappeared. His body quickly disintegrated, leaving only a pile of white bones on the ground. Gabby, damn it! Seeing the tragic death of the magic light warrior, a young man in a black battle suit, covered in blood, roared and rushed towards Gray with murderous intent in his eyes. The saber glowed with a golden light. Just by passing by, a king-level warrior from the Western Ho Kingdom exploded under the terrifying aura of sharpness. The attack power attached to the sword was enough to reach the 5th level of magic light. Clang! Gray's sword was wrapped in black mist. He blocked the attack with a horizontal block and quickly slashed at the young man with his sword. Clang, clang, clang. Gray's sword collided with the young man's battle sword. The aftermath of the black mist and the golden light splashed in all directions like cannonballs. Some of the king-level warriors who were affected by the attacks were injured on the spot. Seeing this, the king-level warriors who were fighting around them could not help but retreat in shock. With Gray and the young man as the center, the area within a radius of a few hundred meters became a forbidden zone. He actually blocked Randy Tuya? The three royal siblings of the West Hermit Kingdom could not help but be slightly surprised when they saw Gray fighting the young man without showing any signs of losing. To be able to reach the 5th level of magic light at such a young age, the young man who was fighting with Gray was naturally not simple. His name was Randy Tuya, and he was the strongest member of the younger generation of the Tuya Kingdom's royal family. In the past battles, among the younger generation of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, only the eldest prince, Hall Seif, could block him. Now, Gray was blocking him without showing any signs of losing, which surprised them slightly. Clang, clang, clang. After dozens of consecutive exchanges, Randy Tuya retreated and distanced himself from Gray. He looked at Gray with fear. "You're not from the West Hermit Kingdom. Who are you?" With such strength at such a young age, if the other party was from the West Hermit Kingdom, the Tuya Kingdom's spies in the West Hermit Kingdom should have known about him before this. "I'm indeed not from the West Hermit Kingdom. Let me give you a piece of advice. Withdraw your troops quickly, or you'll lose miserably." With a pair of greenish-black wings growing out of his back, Gray hovered in the sky and said with a lack of interest. He did not have any ill feelings toward the Tuya Kingdom. It was not because the Tuya Kingdom's invasion had done them a great favor and allowed the marriage to be successful. He had to thank the Tuya Kingdom for that. However, since the Urgas family had already joined the West Hermit Kingdom through marriage, they naturally had to express their gratitude. Therefore, they had no choice but to come and participate in the war. Since he did not have any ill feelings toward the Tuya kingdom, he naturally hoped that the Tuya kingdom could withdraw their troops as soon as possible and end this war. Arrogant. Randy Tuya coldly grunted and attacked Gray again. Gray's appearance gave him a bad feeling. However, the Tuya kingdom had been preparing for this war for a long time. They had also arranged for backup. Naturally, they would not retreat so easily. Randy did not have that much power either. With the addition of reinforcements, the West Hermit Kingdom's side clearly had the upper hand. Whether it was in the sky or on the ground, the battle was tilted toward the West Hermit Kingdom. Boom! Behind the Tuya kingdom, an Annihilation-class elite could not help but attack. The scary blood beast power turned into a giant hand and slammed down. A West Hermit Kingdom Magic Light Tier 5 elite was hit and flew backward while spitting out blood. A few bones in his body were broken. Boom! Just as the Tuya Kingdom Annihilation-class elite was about to attack again and kill the West Hermit Kingdom Magic Light Tier 5 elite, behind the West Hermit Kingdom, the scary blood beast power turned into a giant claw and blocked the giant hand. The wild shockwave hit the king-class warriors of the two kingdoms and made them spit out blood. Even the magic light warriors could not help but fall back. The Annihilation-class elites of both sides started to fight. It meant that the battle had reached its climax. In this war, the most important thing was the clash between the Annihilation-class elite. Although the clash between the Annihilation-class elites could weaken the overall power of the other kingdom, it was not decisive. Only the clash between the Annihilation-class elites could decide the outcome of this war. Everyone below Magic Light, retreat! The two kingdoms did not hesitate to order the Blood Warriors below Magic Light to retreat. In the face of an Annihilation-class clash, even the shockwave was a disaster for those below Magic Light. Boom! Rumble, rumble, rumble! In the sky, the Magic Light battlefield was supposed to be in the center. It was now occupied by a dozen people from both sides. The Magic Light warriors who were fighting each other were fighting and retreating. They did not want to become victims of the Annihilation-class attacks. Buzz! A scary shockwave spread out from the center of the battle. Even the clouds were torn apart. The sky, which had been filled with thick white clouds, was now clear. On the ground, the shockwave would occasionally sweep across. Suddenly, a deep trench that was a few miles long appeared. Hot light flashed in the center. White, gold, purple. The hot light was very bright. It was like a sun of many different colors were blooming in the sky. The West Ho Kingdom had 6 Annihilation-class elite. The Tuya Kingdom also had 6 Annihilation-class elite. It seemed to be a battle of equal power. In the next moment, something strange happened in the magic light. Blurg! An old man with messy hair suddenly exploded with Annihilation-class power. He punched the magic light warrior he was fighting and blew him apart. A middle-aged man with neatly combed hair suddenly exploded with Annihilation-class power. He cut the magic light warrior he was fighting in half. Then, the two of them each went toward a West Ho Kingdom Annihilation-class elite who was fighting someone else. Facing the two of them, the 2 Annihilation-class elites of the West Ho Kingdom were at a disadvantage. One of them was punched in the stomach. He spat out blood and flew away. The other had a serious wound on his body. Tuya Kingdom, is this what gives you the confidence to start a war with the West Ho Kingdom? Among the Annihilation-class elites of the West Ho Kingdom, a tall old man's face was green. The Tuya Kingdom was supposed to have 7 Annihilation-class elites, just like the West Ho Kingdom, which had lost one of their consecrators. Aside from the one who could not leave the stronghold, both sides should have had the same number of Annihilation-class elite. Now, the Tuya Kingdom had 2 more Annihilation-class elite. It is too late to find out now. In the Tuya Kingdom, a tall, skinny old man laughed proudly. Among the 2 new Annihilation-class elites, one of them was a consecrator that had been hired in recent years. The other one was someone in the family who had broken through Annihilation-class. After learning that one of the consecrators of the West Ho Kingdom had died, and they had 2 more Annihilation-class elites on their side, the Tuya kingdom could not help but think of attacking the West Ho kingdom. They wanted to take the West Ho kingdom's land and resources. That was why the war had started. Chapter 726. It's too early to laugh. The big old man from West Ho kingdom's face was no longer green. He looked disdainful as he spoke politely. My friend from the Urgash family, please do something. So. Following his voice, Joshua and the other 3 Urgash family annihilation elites quickly flew into the sky. 2 of them went to help the 2 annihilation elites from West Ho kingdom who were being attacked. The other went to attack an annihilation elite from Tuya kingdom. Poof! The poisonous shadows that blotted out the sky turned into sharp blades and attacked this person. This person dodged several of the blades, but he was still hit by several of them. Many parts of his body were injured, and he could not stabilize his body and crashed into the ground. His wounds turned green, and it was obvious that he had been poisoned. The Urgash family? The top family in Chaos Territory, the Urgash family? This time, it was the skinny old man from Tuya kingdom who looked green. He looked at Joshua and the other 2 and angrily scolded them. Urgash family, the Tuya kingdom has no grudge against you. Why are you helping the West Ho kingdom attack the Tuya kingdom? We have no choice. The Urgash family and the West Ho kingdom's king have a marriage alliance. Joshua shrugged helplessly. A marriage alliance? West Ho kingdom, what a good plan. The skinny old man from Tuya kingdom stared at the tall old man from West Ho kingdom. The tall old man from West Ho kingdom smiled proudly. You are from the Urgash family? Randy Tuya stared at Gray with anger in his eyes. The appearance of Joshua and the other 2 made him guess who Gray was. The Urgash family was one of the top families in Chaos Territory. Their family's power was not much weaker than the Tuya kingdom's. As a member of that family, it was not hard to understand why he had the power to fight him. You could say that. Gray nodded. The Urgash family belonged to him. He was from the Urgash family, so it was not wrong to think that way. The Urgash family I will remember. Randy Tuya's face was green. His battle sword was shining with gold light. The golden light became a battle sword that was a few meters long. It tore through the air and created ripples. It was like a golden light was attacking Gray. Clang! Gray's sword was shrouded in black mist. With a sweep of his sword, he blocked the surging sword. Then, he waved his sword continuously, clashing with his opponent's saber in the air. From time to time, the white clouds that drifted over were riddled with holes and torn to shreds by their attack. There was no doubt that the combat strength of the 2 was evenly matched. Of course, this was the result of Gray holding back. Gray did not have a good impression of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. Naturally, he did not intend to eliminate any future troubles for them. It was better to leave an enemy like this young man, who possessed great strength and potential, alive for the West Hermit Kingdom. Boom, boom, boom. A bright light shone in the sky. It was so bright that people could not open their eyes. It was like many suns were blooming in the sky. Every Annihilation class elite was like a sun. In the end, the battle ended with the defeat of the Tuya Kingdom. With one less person, the Tuya Kingdom's Annihilation class elites were defeated. In this battle, the Tuya Kingdom had lost many people below Annihilation class. The 8 Annihilation class elites were all injured. Gray had asked Josh to maintain his combat strength at the first tier of Annihilation class. He was holding back. The West Hermit Kingdom's royal family was selfish. Gray thought it was best to leave a powerful enemy for the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He wanted them to realize the importance of their ally, the Urgas family. Otherwise, they might regret the marriage between Francis and Dana West Hermit. The marriage with the Urgas family must be maintained. And his worries were clearly not unfounded. After they defeated the Tuya Kingdom and returned to the West Hermit Kingdom's capital, King Bowent West Hermit's attitude became ambiguous. He had the thought of finding an excuse to postpone the marriage between the two. After learning that the Tuya Kingdom had 8 Annihilation class elites in the battle, the West Hermit Kingdom's power was weaker than the Tuya Kingdom's. He immediately dismissed the idea. The Tuya Kingdom's power had greatly increased. The West Hermit Kingdom could not stop them on their own. At a critical moment, they might have to ask the Urga's family for help. The marriage with the Urga's family was necessary. He did not only have one daughter. Aside from Dana, he had another daughter. She could be used as a tool to form alliances with other factions. He did not need to do anything to the marriage. After staying in the West Hermit Kingdom's capital for a while, Gray and the others left the West Hermit Kingdom and returned to the Urga's family. Of course, Dana West Hermit was in their group. Aside from that, there were also people from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. In the Urga's family, they held a grand wedding. From the preparation to the end, the wedding took a month. Francis and Dana West finally became husband and wife. Gray, I do not know how to thank you. Francis was very grateful to Gray. Originally, he had thought that his life would be filled with regrets, and that he and Dana would only be able to spend the rest of their lives in mutual longing. However, with Gray's help, he had made up for this regret and was able to live happily with the person he loved. There is no need for that between us. Gray shook his head. Whether it was from the perspective of a friend or from the perspective of Sophia's elder brother, he could not help. If you really want to thank me, you and Dana can stay in the Urga's family. Just treat it as monitoring the Urga's family for me. You are not going to stay here for a long time? Francis looked at Gray in confusion. Yes, the Urga's family is just a family that I have subdued recently. Previously, I also subdued a top family called Leopold. My identity to the outside world is also that of a disciple of the Leopold family. Gray nodded. There is another top family? Francis looked at Gray in astonishment. He looked at Gray as if he was looking at a monster. Just the Urga's family alone was almost as powerful as the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He did not expect that this was not all of Gray's forces. He actually had another top family under his control. It is just a family at the bottom of the top families. It is much weaker than the Urga's family. Gray explained with a smile. That is still very impressive. Francis sighed again and again. He did not know what to say. Compared to Leyland, his 2 years in the origin world could be described as nothing. However, he did not regret it because he had found his other half to spend the rest of his life with. He was already very satisfied. Whether it is the Urga's family or the Leopold family, they are both families that are subdued by brute force. There is a possibility of them rebelling at any time. I need to go back and watch over the Leopold family, so I hope you can monitor the Urga's family for me. Gray said with a slightly solemn expression. These words were not all lies. Not everyone in the Urga's family was controlled by the resurrection ability. Many of them were subdued. It was hard to guarantee that they would not have any thoughts after he left. Don't worry, I will pay more attention. Francis nodded solemnly and then sighed. Speaking of which, you really surprised me. It has only been 2 years since we came to the origin world. Not only have you become so strong, but you also have such a powerful force. It has been 2 years. Francis's words made Gray fall into deep thought. I really want to return to the plane. Return to the plane? Don't do that. It is too dangerous. Hearing Gray's words, Francis quickly stopped him. His current knowledge was naturally not comparable to when he was in the plane. It was also because of this that he understood the terror of a sacred temple. Every single Saint-tier organization was a terrifying organization. They were organizations that could easily wipe out peak clans. Even now, when he thought about it, he could not help but rejoice. Fortunately, he had the random teleportation orb. Otherwise, the 4 of them would have died under the pursuit of the Radiant Saint Hall. Although Gray was not weak now, he would definitely encounter the Radiant Saint Palace if he returned to the plane. Francis was not optimistic about Gray's current conflict with the Radiant Saint Palace. It would be like throwing an egg at a rock. I don't plan on returning right now. I just thought about it. Gray shook his head. He obviously understood the terror of the Radiant Saint Palace. He also understood that with his current strength, he definitely could not contend against the Radiant Saint Palace. However, with his ability of the laws of space, he did not necessarily have to encounter the Radiant Saint Palace if he wanted to enter the plane. Moreover, he did not plan on setting off right now. He planned to increase his cultivation by 2 or 3 more realms before setting off. Currently, he possessed a large amount of cultivation resources. In particular, after encircling the nothingness beasts, he had obtained a large number of crystal cores from the 4 clans. With the crystal cores and supplementary cultivation resources, he believed that his strength would grow rapidly in the next 2 or 3 years. When the crystal cores were used up, his cultivation would probably increase by 2 or 3 realms. By then, with his strength and teleportation, he would be able to deal with most threat. Even if he could not defeat them, he should be able to escape. Chapter 727. After returning to the Leopold clan, Gray no longer went out and began to cultivate in peace. During this period, many top clans sent out invitations to the Leopold clan, whose reputation was gradually spreading. Gray did not follow them and left everything to Fod. He spent most of his time cultivating blood spells, blood skills, and learning alchemy. The blood spells he was currently cultivating were blood spells called Frostfire Ape, the blood spells in the spatial rulebook. Because he did not have the corresponding 4-elemental bloodline, he could not cultivate them. However, with his current power, it was naturally easy to find a suitable blood spells. Time flew by quickly as he cultivated. 3 years later, I've finally reached the annihilation grade. Feeling the terrifying power that filled his body and the huge and solid blood power vortex in his heart, Gray let out a long sigh. In 3 years, he had advanced from the 3rd grade of magic light to the annihilation grade. On average, he had advanced by 1 grade per year. 1 grade had even advanced from the magic light grade to the annihilation grade. This speed of advancement was not slow but could be described as terrifying. The higher the grade, the more difficult it was to advance. The magic light grade could still maintain the speed of advancing by 1 grade per year. Even the saints and saintesses of the various temples could not achieve this. Under normal circumstances, Gray was the same. Even if he had the 2nd metamorphosis state that could accelerate the advancement of his strength, he could not do it. The reason he could do it was because he had a large number of auxiliary cultivation potions and precious crystal cores. Under the dual effects of these 2 precious resources, he was able to advance at such a fast speed. However, this was the limit of what he could do at the moment. With the supply from the 5 top clans, the auxiliary cultivation potions were sufficient, but there was not a single crystal core left. These things could only be produced from the bodies of void beasts in the Void Zone. Moreover, the Void Zone was invaded by the Origin World and was not easy to come across, so there was no place to buy them. Even the clans who had them would not sell them. After all, these things and auxiliary cultivation potions were not mutually exclusive. If they could be used at the same time, they would not even have enough for themselves, let alone sell them. Perhaps only the factions of the temples would have a certain level of production. After all, contenders of the natural order could survive in the Void Zone, but there would not be many of them. Rule-level contenders were existences at the apex of the world. Why would they focus on hunting void beasts? Occasionally, when they needed to enter the Void Zone, they would hunt some void beast. It's been 5 years. It's time for me to return to my realm. I wonder how the Fergus family is doing, and how the realm is doing. Gray's eyes became firm as he made a decision. Annihilation class, time rule power, and space rule power. Now, regardless of whether it was his power or his ability to protect himself, he was extremely strong. It was time for him to go back. Before that, I need to carefully consider my future cultivation. According to the Space Rulebook, the practice after annihilation class was split into two parts. One aspect was the transformation of one's ability. To put it simply, it was to temper one's blood force, body, and soul through the corresponding secret technique to promote the transformation of one's blood force, body, and soul. Then, through the transformation of one's body, it would promote the transformation of the other two. Completing one metamorphosis was called the second level of annihilation class. Completing two metamorphoses was called the third level of annihilation class, and so on. The second aspect was the implantation of new blood vessels to master more blood beast abilities. This was a dangerous process that required a strong body. It also required the assistance of special magic potions that lowered the activity of the blood vessels. Even so, it was still very dangerous. If one was not careful, they could become a beast that lost its mind due to the conflict of the blood vessels, or their realm would drop. However, although this process was dangerous, it was necessary. Only people with an affinity body could avoid it. Every single type of ability could only trigger one metamorphosis. To reach the 6th level of annihilation class, a total of 5 abilities were needed. In other words, a complete rule power was needed. Because of the uniqueness of rule power only existing in blood beasts, directly obtaining a rule power through implantation was not possible. Implantation of a second or even a third type of blood vessels was necessary unless one did not want to progress further. Time rule power and space rule power. Which rule power should I use to transform first? Gray, who now had more than 10 types of blood beast abilities, did not need to consider implantation of a new blood vessel. Now, he needed to consider which rule power should he use to transform his 5 abilities. The Space Rulebook had the secrets of thunder, metal, water, shadow, and earth element metamorphosis. It also had the supplementary potions needed. Gray had the Annihilation class blood skills of Leopold, the Vega family, the Ugarth family, the Tulii family, and the Donnie family. He had also pieced together the Time Rule Powers metamorphosis secrets and the supplementary potions needed. Now, he needed to make a choice. Which rule power should he use as the first metamorphosis ability? The Time Rule Power is something I have pieced together from the 5 families. The Space Rule Power secret skill comes from the Spacebook. It must have come from a Holy Palace faction. After thinking for a while, Gray made a decision. He chose the Space Rule Power. The Time Rule Power secret skill was something he had pieced together from the 5 families. It did not seem to be of a high level. Otherwise, Joshua would not have been the only one in the 5 families who had reached the 2nd level of Annihilation class. The Space Rule Power secret skill came from the Spacebook. It must have been a book that belonged to the Holy Palace faction. As the blood skills of the Holy Palace faction, the secret skill recorded in it would not be of a low level. Comparing the two, the Space Rule Power was a better choice. With the super memory ability, he would never forget anything he had seen. After reviewing the corresponding secret techniques of the 5 spatial laws in his mind, Gray began to try to cultivate them. I will choose Thunder as the first metamorphosis ability. The first transformation ability he chose was Lightning. According to the secret method recorded in the Space Rulebook, he needed to form a special lightning rune in his body with the power of blood. Then, he would insert this lightning rune into the power of blood vortex and use the power of the lightning rune to promote the transformation of the power of blood. 1 pattern, 2 patterns, 3 patterns. After confirming there were no mistakes, Gray started to build the lightning rune in his body. His super memory ability allowed him to have absolute memory. He would never forget anything he saw. The lightning pattern was completely memorized in his mind. Even so, it took him an hour to complete the construction of the lightning rune. That was because the lightning rune was too complicated. It was made up of tens of thousands of patterns. Even if he did not make a single mistake, it still took him a long time. Fortunately, when he got used to it, the time it took to build it would be shorter. Otherwise, every practice would take an hour to prepare. The time he spent practicing would be much less. Crack! Pitter-patter! The moment the lightning rune was successfully constructed, a change naturally occurred. Lightning as thin as a strand of hair spread out from the lightning rune towards the vortex of blood force. Pitter-patter! When it came into contact with the lightning, Yangming's blood force was like a surging blood cloud as it shook violently. Amidst the turbulence, Yangming's blood force's strength slowly increased. Of course, the increase was so slight that it was almost undetectable. A few hours later, Gray ended his cultivation. He could not help but shake his head when he sensed the changes in his blood power. The increase is too slow. If I do not have the help of medicine, I am afraid it will take me 100 years to make my blood power change and increase a level. Gray finally understood why most of the Annihilation elites were stuck at the first level. Practicing the high-class secret skills of the Holy Palace faction could not increase a level even after 100 years. Practicing the normal secret skills was even slower. It was no wonder some people were still stuck at the first level of Annihilation class when they died of old age. I need to use other methods. In Gray's mind, he quickly found the formula for the Thunder Pattern Potion, which was an auxiliary training potion that he needed to temper his Thunder attribute ability. Gold and Silver Mushroom, Thunder Cloud Grass, Thunder Flower, Double Moon Flower. After looking at the formula for the Thunder Potion, Gray was speechless. To make this magic potion, it required 100 different magic herbs. One of them was even more precious than the Blood Moon Grass. Gray estimated that even with the resources of the top 5 families, they would only be able to find a few. That was not the most troublesome part. The most troublesome part was the level of the potion. It is a 5th level potion. Aubrey was only a 4th level potion master. Although he had the potential to become a 5th level potion master, he was not yet a 5th level potion master. He did not have the ability to make the potion. Han Sun had grown a lot in the past 3 years. He had become a 3rd level potion master, but the gap between him and Aubrey was even bigger. There was no way he could make the potion. Among the people I know, I am afraid only Master Roman has the ability to make it. Last time, I rejected his offer to be a student. If I ask him for the potion, I am afraid. Gray thought of Master Roman, but he rejected the idea. He might not say yes. It would be too awkward to ask him. I will not consider the help potion for now. Aside from the help potion, I am afraid the only way to increase my speed is through the second change. After reaching Annihilation class, Gray felt that the second change had been removed from his body. He was now no different from an ordinary person. If he did not practice, his power would not increase. If he wanted to regain the second change, the method was simple. He had to find the blood of a Rule-class blood beast and consume it. Then, he would be able to achieve the second change. Of course, if he wanted to use blood skill training and the second change to complement each other, it would be best if he consumed the blood of a Space Rule blood beast. Where can I find the blood of a Space Rule blood beast? Even if I can find the blood of a Rule-class blood beast, it will be fine. But finding Rule-class blood is easier said than done. Gray shook his head with a wry smile. The next moment, he froze. Space Rule blood beast blood was difficult to find, but Rule-class blood beast blood was not impossible. The blood of an unknown level he had obtained last time might have been Rule-class blood beast blood. Chapter 728. Previously, because of the Fox of Disaster Puppet's blood, Gray had temporarily given up on consuming the unknown blood beast's blood. Since then, he had put the blood aside and had not consumed it until now. Now that he wanted to obtain a Rule-class bloodline, he could not help but think of this unknown blood beast's blood. What was certain was that this blood beast's level was extremely high. It was definitely beyond the ordinary disaster class. It was at least close to a Rule-class blood beast's blood. It might even be a Rule-class blood beast's blood. He took out the blood from the space item. Inside the transparent crystal bottle was red blood. The color was scarlet like a ruby. If he did not shake it, it could be mistaken for a ruby. A terrifying pressure spread out. It was extremely strong. Even though it was not the first time he had faced this kind of pressure, when he took out the blood and felt the pressure, Gray could not help but feel his body slightly tense. That was the natural reaction of the body when it felt danger. In other words, the blood beast with this kind of blood had the ability to bring danger to Gray. It should be known that Gray had reached the annihilation class and had mastered the time rule and space rule. If it could still bring him danger, one could imagine how strong the blood beast with this kind of blood was. After uncorking the bottle, the smell of blood and a faint fragrance entered Gray's nose. Obviously, the blood was still fresh and had not decayed. Even after a long time, it still had not decayed. It was unknown whether it was because the outer layer of the gem had prevented it from decaying or because the level of the blood was extremely high. It had the ability to preserve freshness that time could not destroy. Gulp! After drinking the blood, Gray's body suddenly reacted. His body temperature was soaring. It was as if there was a furnace in his body that was emitting scorching heat, causing his body temperature to soar rapidly. In a short period of time, it exceeded 100 degrees Celsius and continued to increase rapidly. 200 degrees Celsius. 300 degrees Celsius. 1000 degrees Celsius. Under the effect of the furnace in his body temperature quickly exceeded 1000 degrees Celsius. The clothes on his body turned into ashes, and the ground under his feet turned into magma. With such a high temperature, an ordinary person would have been burned to ashes. However, he was obviously not an ordinary person. He was a blood warrior, and an annihilation-class blood warrior at that. He was a powerful existence that could destroy a city with a population of millions with just his physical strength. Therefore, even though his body temperature was over 1000 degrees Celsius, he was still not burned to ashes. However, although he was not burned to ashes, a shocking change appeared on his body. Swish, swish, swish. Rays of dazzling white light shone from his body. As the temperature of his body rose higher and higher, he actually began to emit light. The light was so dazzling that it was hard to open one's eyes. At this moment, he was like a sun that was radiating heat. Even the light of the burning sun in the sky was suppressed by his light at this moment. Poof, poof, poof. The courtyard Gray lived in suffered a devastating blow. Beams of light pierced through the walls and ceiling. In just an instant, the courtyard he lived in was riddled with holes. Even the surrounding buildings were affected. Fortunately, this was an important place of the Leopold family. Fod and the others quickly reacted and used their abilities to hold up a barrier, blocking the light that Gray unconsciously shot out. After a long time, the transformation finally ended. Gray's courtyard had been completely turned into ruins. The ground under his feet had turned into magma. At this moment, he was standing naked in the magma. Walking out of the magma, he activated a blue ring on his finger. Gray put on a blue combat suit. Looking around, Gray helplessly shook his head. The commotion caused by swallowing the blood beast blood this time was too great. Fortunately, Fod and the others blocked the light in time. Otherwise, it would not be just one courtyard that was damaged, but the entire residence of the Leopold family. After taking a bath and changing to another courtyard, Gray had time to check the changes of the blood he swallowed this time. Slightly anticipating, he closed his eyes. As usual, Gray began to feel the power in his body through the blood vessels. After a moment, he opened his eyes, which were filled with astonishment. No increase in power? After causing such a huge commotion, he originally thought that he would obtain a new ability, or even a rule ability directly. However, to his surprise, he did not obtain any ability, not even a single elemental ability. No increase in a single elemental ability. It seems that I already possessed the few single elemental abilities that made up the unknown blood beast ability. Soon, Gray thought of the reason. The reason why he did not obtain a new single elemental ability after swallowing the blood of the unknown blood beast was that the single elemental abilities that made up the unknown blood beast ability could be found in his body. Naturally, there was no increase in a single elemental ability. No new hybrid ability or rule ability. It seems that this should be the uniqueness of the abilities recorded in the Book of Spatial Rules. His right index finger and thumb supported his chin. Gray thought of a record in the Book of Spatial Rules. According to the records in the Book of Spatial Rules, abilities were unique. In a person's body, an ability could only exist in a rule ability. For example, the lightning ability existed in a rule ability of space. Gray could not have other rule abilities that were made up of lightning abilities. He could not even form a hybrid ability that had nothing to do with the spatial rules. The hybrid ability or rule ability of the unknown blood beast's blood should have overlapped with the time or space rules in his body. Therefore, after being constructed in his body, it automatically disintegrated and did not form a hybrid ability or rule ability. I wonder if the unknown blood beast's ability is a hybrid ability or a rule ability? Gray frowned. Due to the uniqueness of the ability, the unknown blood beast's ability disintegrated and did not form a hybrid ability or rule ability in his body. Therefore, he could not determine whether the unknown blood beast's ability was a hybrid ability or a rule ability. Judging from the reaction of the body's transformation, it might be a light rule ability. Thinking of the transformation process, Gray made a guess. Although he could not control the transformation process, he could still feel his body emitting a white light that resembled the sun. He could not help but think of the Saint of the Light's law of light, as it was too similar to her law of light. Of course, this was only his guess. Whether it was true or not, he would never be able to verify it. It was a pity that he could not obtain a new rule ability or a hybrid ability. The only thing that comforted Gray was that the second transformation was only related to the level of his bloodline. Even if the blood of an unknown blood beast was not at the rule rank, it was close to the rule rank. It would definitely trigger a second transformation. Now, all he had to do was wait to determine which elemental ability would be triggered by the second transformation. He had secret techniques for all 10 types of abilities, such as time and space rules. After confirming the ability of the transformation, he could cultivate the corresponding secret technique. Naturally, the speed of improvement would increase. Of course, if possible, Gray still hoped that the transformation ability triggered by the second transformation would be related to the spatial rule ability. After all, the spatial rule ability secret techniques came from the Book of Spatial Rules and were obviously of a higher level than the time rule ability secret technique. A few days later, under the second transformation state, Gray's blood force underwent an obvious change. The blood force that should have been as red as blood now had a few strands of gold inside it. Although they were very few, they were there. These strands of gold had a sharp aura that gave Gray the feeling of seeing a sharp blade. The first ability of the transformation is not a thunder ability, but a metal ability. According to the records in the Book of Spatial Rules, such a change was a characteristic of the metamorphosis of the metal ability. In other words, the first transformation ability triggered by the second transformation was a metal ability. Gray was quite satisfied with this. Although it was not a thunder ability but a metal ability, it was also one of the spatial rule abilities. The cultivation method was also a high-level secret technique in the Book of Spatial Rules. The first transformation ability has been confirmed. It's time to move. After finishing his training, Gray felt that the improvement he received every day under the state of the second metamorphosis had increased by leaps and bounds. He decided to return to the plane. After leaving for 5 years, it was time to go back. He did not take anyone with him. He only saw Francis before leaving. Then, Gray set off in the direction of the Light Territory. The Light Territory was the name of the territory controlled by the Light Temple. It was located in the east of the Source World. It was an area that was no smaller than the Chaos Territory. Whoosh! He used teleportation to travel to places where there were no people. He used flying to travel to places where there were people. Very quickly, half a month passed. Gray had already left the Chaos Territory. He had already passed through a few territories. Not every territory had a holy faction. In fact, most of the territories did not have a holy temple faction. Compared to the Chaos Territory, these territories were more like the Chaos Territory. Without a holy temple faction that could set the rules, these territories were even more chaotic than the Chaos Territory. All the clans kept fighting. Along the way, Gray saw more than a dozen battles of different sizes. There were even annihilation-class battles. There were still some forces that treated Gray as an enemy force and attacked him. Naturally, Gray didn't hold back. He taught this force a lesson and plundered the family as compensation. Whoosh! One day, Gray was hurrying through the sky. Suddenly, a terrifying gale that tore through the air came from behind Gray. He turned around to look, and immediately saw a super-large runic ship approaching him at high speed. This was a gigantic runic ship that was 400 to 500 meters long. It was the largest runic ship that Gray had ever seen. The scariest thing about it was the speed of the rune ship. It was Annihilation class, so Gray's flying speed was Annihilation class as well. But the speed of the rune ship was faster than Gray's speed. It was much faster than the speed of a normal rune ship's magic light.